How is everybody doing tonight? It is Thursday night. It is the last Thursday of the month of February 2022. And we are finding ourselves here on the Nights of Last Call Thursday live stream. A chance for us to hang out and talk a little bit about role-playing games, Pathfinder 2, well, just about anything. If you really have any other particular interests, I also enjoy woodworking, sailing. I used to work out quite a bit. Ben, on the Thursdays, I do like to try to get a little start early because I don't want to run into Critical Role too much, and I like to wind the week down. We go, we go at 8 on the actual plays because we want to reach as broad of an audience as we can. We want to make sure that those West Coast people have a chance to take a look at us. So, yeah. Hopefully everyone's doing well. We had some big changes over at the Nights of Last Call Patreon this week. We reordered our Discord. We announced a couple programs. We hinted at some new programs coming out soon. So, it's all good. Hopefully you are doing well. Things are pretty crazy out there right now in the wide world. So I don't know if anybody watches this from Ukraine or that part of the world, but I certainly hope the best for all of you and hope the situation gets resolved rather quickly. It's a very, very unfortunate set of circumstances that we find ourselves in, but that's the world we live in. May you live in interesting times, the ancient Chinese proverb said, and it was not a compliment. Thank you.
Billy Big Boy Brandy tipped $10. Spin the wheel of Pathfinder.
Nope, sorry. That's the wrong channel. That's a different one. That reminds me, I do need to change that. I have the stream elements thing backward. It's written as recent super chat, but that was actually a recent tip, and the recent tip was actually the recent super chat. Have I ever built a boat? No. My goal as a young man, when I say young man, I mean by the time I was in my late 20s, I wanted to retire at age of 42. I knew I wasn't planning on getting married. I knew I wasn't planning on having any kids, and I'm about to be 40 this year, and that's still true. But my goal was to just save a bunch of money, buy a lot of Magic cards, invest in a lot of, stocks and bonds, maybe buy some real estate. And then when I was 42, retire, sell off a considerable amount of my assets, buy a sailboat and move to the Caribbean and live down there for, 6 to 8 months a year, and probably come back home and visit for 4 to 5 months, and at least do that for a couple of years. And then maybe, by the time that my friends' children had all sort of grown up and they were sort of back to being completely free adults again, maybe sell the boat, maybe move back up and try to do something else, or who knows? There was talks of doing something like a YouTube channel. But that ended up not happening because I ended up losing my job in 2017. And, my whole life got turned upside down. So here we are. It's actually sort of a reverseism. I chose 42 because it is the ultimate answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything. I appreciate that you're here, though, because, as you said, these streams start at midnight. Ouch. So, appreciate it. That's correct, William Brand. It's cool. Now that you guys have ditched the kids, we can get this campaign going again. That is correct. Damian Williams, a.k.a. Pawn No Longer, super chatting $10 for unwillingly serving in the Command of the Away mission on Monday and doing well. Yes, Damian Williams, a.k.a. Pawn No Longer, is running a Star Trek Adventures game on our Patreon Discord as part of our community game series, which is open to everyone. And he was gracious enough to let me play. And it was my first time actually playing a 2D20 game system, and I really enjoyed it. I'm eager to get a little bit more deep into the game system to see what it can do. But there's definitely some interesting mechanical things that are going on there that I think really help reinforce genre narrative and really make your character's personality and background, really sing mechanically in terms of what you're doing feels like something that a character of your type and your nature and your background would be doing, and you felt mechanically distinct. I thought it was pretty fun. If we're talking about the game, I felt like the sort of extended skill challenges, I can't remember what they were called, were pretty interesting way of handling it. The combat felt a little clunky, I will admit that, but it's Star Trek, so I don't really expect the combat to be that great in a game that's predominantly known for being not, a very combative sci-fi, series. Frank says, nice dream. Keep at it. Things have changed, Frank. Part of the reason was at that time I wasn't really doing anything that I was really super passionate about or super love. I have a fantastic job now that gives me a lot of freedom to sort of explore the areas of my career that I'm more interested in than sort of being part of a bureaucratic corporate nightmare mess. And I also have this channel. And, thanks to everyone at home, it's doing quite well. We're small potatoes in the grand scheme of things, but I did check before we went live, and I believe that we are only about 10 people off from having more patrons than No Nat Ones himself. So we've grown a lot. And we're trying to make the Patreon better. We're trying to make the Discord more engaging. We're trying to find ways to give everyone more value. And of course, we want to figure out ways to get more content out to everyone as well. And I'm pretty excited about it, to be honest with you. It'll be pretty cool. My expectation going into tonight was that it was going to be a fairly light evening. Looks like we got about 20 people in the chat. We usually get another 5 to 10 that sort of, or 50% of that trickle in over the next, 5 to 10, 20 minutes. So people have kind of figured out we usually rant a little bit here. So, we'll just kind of, shoot the shit for a little bit, and then we'll get into the spells. Tonight, we're going to be handling Primal spells, level 2. There's a couple of key spells I really want to talk about that relate to Pathfinder 2 and how the game elements and some of the game design decisions may not exactly align with what I really want out of the game. And we will also, of course, rate the spells. There are certainly a couple Fs. But the good news is that most of the level 2 Primal list was already covered in our Arcane list. So we've got most of the spells already rated, and we have a smidge under 30 to do. So we've got plenty of time. Hey, you know what? It's our first time for everybody. I'm not going to fault you down for that one, Damien. So yeah. Let's see. Other than that, I've really been just kind of flummoxed about where I want to go and what I want to do with with my role playing, because I've been playing a lot of Pathfinder 2, as you all well know. And I have a Legend of the Five Rings game, but in the interest of the channel, the Legend of the Five Rings game has now sort of been, it's more ad hoc. It's not a regularly scheduled game anymore. And I really want to schedule that game up again, because I'm really having a lot of fun with that game. It's a lot of fun. But it's weird because I feel, and this is going to sound crazy, right? I feel a strange sense of guilt almost now when I play a game that isn't being live streamed or isn't being recorded, or that I'm not really going to focus on or talk about because I know it's a fairly, niche or small game. And it's not like a business pressure thing, but it's sort of just like, hey, I love role-playing games. Why not focus on the role-playing games that I know everybody else is interested in and that everybody else wants to talk about and everybody would love to see a video about? And it's a very interesting it's a very interesting kind of spot to be in. Like our Friday night games, which are sort of our casual home games, which are run by William Brandes, Aaron Smith on the of the Knights. It's Pathfinder 2, and we're playtesting some crazy new homebrew material that Brandes designed and developed, and that we've kind of been working on. And so it feels like an excuse, right? Like we can get away with that a little bit. And I'm just aware that my particular, even amongst the Knights of Last Call community, that is a very, engaged, intelligent, open, experimental community. I understand that I am a crazy person, that my particular views and takes of the way role-playing games should be experienced and used and utilized is very, very, very unusual. We were, I think it was 2 weeks ago during the Rise of the Runelords AP, the party tipped.
Bennett tipped $10. F it. Just run Dungeon World for the AP.
Well, thank you, Ben. Ben A with the $10 tip saying, screw it, just run Dungeon World. Dungeon World was a very big moment for me in a game. And the key secret about Dungeon World is it has all these rules, and absolutely none of them matter because they are things that as a good GM you should be doing anyways. It was just Apocalypse World and Dungeon World specifically for fantasy role-playing was the first game to really sit down and say, what is the GM's responsibility? What are their agendas? What are their principles? And it really kind of codifies out what you are probably already and automatically doing. And it's something that I think that D20-based games, 5e and Pathfinder 2 included, do not do well, even remotely or close. And it was a very, when I remember reading it, it was like the first time it was like reading something that you already knew, but you didn't know that you knew it. So it was a very transcendental sort of experiment. And honestly, I've said this before, there's a secret hidden bonus episode that we never aired. We recorded it completely, and then I said, I can't air this. We had just gotten a lot of backlash on a video because I kind of talked badly about Pathfinder 2, or I didn't even talk badly about it. I was just criticizing it, and we got a lot of dislikes, and this is back when they showed your dislike ratio, and we were a small channel, and I said, we've got enough content, I'm not going to show it. And I eventually made it available to our patrons as sort of a hidden bonus episode, but I said straight out, if people were new to the game, if these are new tabletop role-playing game people, even people who maybe have some experience with video games and stuff like that, I said, I would never play them through the beginner's box of Pathfinder 2. I would never play them through Pathfinder 2. I probably wouldn't play them through 5th edition. I would probably play them through something like Dungeon World or Fate, and not even like the full Fate. There's a small, very stripped down version of Fate called FAE, Fate Accelerated Edition, and I would really focus on those games because the key of the role playing game is not to teach people what flanking is or what advantage is or what the hell strength and con and explaining to your character that they're strong but somehow not very don't have a lot of endurance or have a lot of endurance but aren't very strong. And what the hell constitution is and getting people to remember dexterity and charisma. Just all these very archaic, backwards ass words. And what you want them to get into the practice of is thinking and reacting to, the situation around them and responding in the way that their character would respond. That's it. I mean, that is what the nature of a role-playing game is. And Dungeon World strips away a lot of those mechanics and makes it very easy for it to be very simplistic and seamless. A great example, and I've used this for a long time, is that whenever I've taught role-playing games for the first time to people who have not played role-playing games before, almost without exception, the same thing happens every time. I will describe, let's say, an orc breaking free from the forest and charging them, howling its battle cry, raising its axe above his head, and maybe I'll start to describe it, bringing it down, or I'll ask the players, what do they do? And inevitably they will say, I defend. I try to get out of the way. I raise my shield. I try to duck and roll. And, at the time, you're playing 3rd edition D&D or Pathfinder 1, you go, no, it doesn't work that way. You're like, I don't understand. You're like, well, that's what your armor class is. Your armor represents your total sum of defensiveness. And I talk a lot about the feel of a game. And I think people associate rolling with activity. They associate rolling dice, with dynamicism and activity and action. And so in their minds, it paints a very incoherent picture, because now they're imagining this very dynamic orc crashing through the underbrush with a massive battle axe raised above its head. And then they're thinking of their character as sort of just standing there, as not being dynamic and not acting or even reacting. And I think that creates a sort of a weird disharmony. And you could say, well, yes, you could describe your character doing all sorts of crazy defensive things. In fact, you should. That's narrative. But I think people understand, well, wait, if I am describing something, but then it doesn't matter whether I describe something or not. When you don't have that mechanical interface with the narrative, people lose interest. And that's why people don't role play, because it doesn't matter. And one of the principles of Dungeon World is to do it. And if you say something, if you want to do something mechanical, you have to do something in the narrative that would trigger that mechanical activity. And at the same time, you can't skimp out on a rule. If you do something in the narrative and the rules say that you need to roll dice for that, well, then by God, you have to roll the dice as well. And so Dungeon World creates an interesting dynamicism, because I have run Dungeon World for new people as well, new people to role-playing games. And I describe that same orc breaking free from the tree line, crashing into their lines with their axe raise. And then I suddenly, boom, I turn my eyes right to someone. I say, and what do you do? And then they say, I raise my shield to defend myself. And I say, okay, roll the dice. And it's a very different experience. People feel when they are rolling dice, when the dice are in their hand, that they are in control. They understand that the outcome may be random, but they are sort of the actors in this situation. And as the protagonists and the main characters, that I think is their baseline expectation, that they are going to be the main drivers of this activity and this action. And so it's really an interesting really an interesting way of playing the game. And Dungeon World was also the system that made me hate cyclical based initiative, because Dungeon World doesn't have that. The GM just says whoever's going to go next. Someone might go 3 times before somebody goes once. There's no, ideally, right? People are all doing things and you're sort of, reacting and going back and forth. But, you can quickly sort of go around the room and have these really interesting moments where, the wizard rolls very poorly, maybe for an attack or from an attempt to dodge. And I describe them falling to their ground, and that the 3 goblin warriors suddenly see that the weakly armored and robed wizard has fallen off of the back of the stone altar and is scrambling to his feet and rushed the wizard. And there's always that sort of like angsty moment, but then I can turn to a completely different player, let's say the fighter, and I go, you see this happening. What do you do? And the fighter kind of goes, I don't know. I rush over there and jump in front of them and wave my sword around. You're like, yes, that is what you're doing. Roll for defend, roll plus con. Because to do it. And what they just described what their character is doing. The goal of the game master or a good player is through the sort of the interface of the game is that gets translated into a game action. So I jump down off of the stone altar with my sword and shield raised and land in front of the wizard as the 3 goblins are closing in. That is what you've described your character doing. Awesome. Dungeon World clearly says that you must do this, but it also says that you must now roll a defend check, which is roll plus con. And the game rules, you can't do one without the other. They are yin and yang. They are tied together at the hip. And so it makes you have this real appreciation for the way role-playing games are supposed to work, maybe, that make them so different than other games. Like, you could certainly play what we would consider to be a bar none role-playing game, but I think at a lot of tables, it tends to drift more towards story games, or it tends to drift more towards, I don't want to use the term board game, but it's almost like, how they call Diablo and games like Diablo, they call them action role-playing games. I would say that, in the middle is sort of a true role-playing game. Over here is storytelling games, and then over here is action role-playing games, which are fun. They can be a lot of fun. But it's worth exploring the space, people. It's worth exploring the space. London, you can easily. I love when the players roll the dice. They are the ones. It's exciting when you hold fate and destiny in your old hands. And it's easy to do in Pathfinder 2 as well. I think before you joined the Patreon, London, we did a whole thing about how Pathfinder 2 is completely backwards compatible. You could just easily add 10 to a monster's attack roll. That becomes the attack DC. And then you subtract 10 from your armor class. That becomes your defensive check. And you make that roll. And just as before, if you critically fail your defensive check, either by rolling a 1 or by rolling 10 or less, the attacker has critically hit you, and you take double damage. The math is exactly literally the same. So, Daco Popper, the freeform initiative works much better when actions have mixed success. In D20 systems, taking actions tends to just be good. Yeah, that's true. I mean, the other nice thing about Dungeon World is every dice roll is going to have some sort of outcome from it. And the whole concept of GM moves, soft moves versus hard moves, is a very interesting way to view the influence of dice rolls. Again, it's not very simulationist. It's definitely a more narrative game. And when I say narrative game, I mean it's narrative and gamist, right? In GNS theory. So a game can have a gaming element, like a board game element. It can have a narrative element, and it can have a simulation element. And Dungeon World tends to be less about the simulation, more about the narrative, and more about the game. So, very cool. Yep, Amber Phoenix, you're correct. You can just flip it around. It works completely the same. I mean, you do this all the time anyways in Pathfinder 2, right? Like, sometimes the monsters are, the players are rolling fort saves, but sometimes the monsters are rolling against, like with an athletics check to trip them. Athletics check to grapple them. They are going up against their fortitude DC. So we are already used to interchanging these numbers back and forth all the time. My suggestion is just that everything on the monster side becomes a DC, and then everything on the player side becomes a check. So, and it works completely. My goal, by the way, is to start doing the spells around 7:30, so we'll get another couple minutes. And by the way, this is an opportunity as we kind of start getting ramped up here. We, of course, here at Knights of Last Call, we want to continue to bring you these live streams, continue to offer you more content, and bring all that stuff. And that is almost 1,000% contributed from these live streams and from our Patreon, who, of course, are our biggest and baddest badasses and supporters. For that reason alone, if you do appreciate what we're talking about here tonight and you want to support the stream, you want to support the Knights, feel free to drop a tip or a super chat. Super chats are great, but tips through Stream Elements are extremely appreciated. They're going to help fill up our little bar there, our little goal of $100 that we have for these live streams. And more importantly, YouTube doesn't take a giant bite out of our ass. So if you have the extra second or two to go through Stream Elements and you want to drop us a tip, we really, really appreciate that. But otherwise, I say just drop a like, continue to support us. Check us out on YouTube. Check us out on Patreon if you want to join our Discord to give it a look-see. Your knowledge on games just blows my mind. It's why I love the Knights. No, I'm just a gigantic, huge nerd. I'm not trying to flex, Floyd. I'm not trying to flex. But yeah, I do love Powered by the Apocalypse game engines. My quote unquote favorite game of all time, which is Monster Hearts, is a Powered by the Apocalypse game engine. I actually have a couple. I have maybe about 10 or 12 PBTA games, and I enjoy them all. Some of them I don't buy to really play. I just buy to mine, right? Get ideas. So yeah, it's been all good stuff. But yeah, I'm at that point now where like, especially because we're in these Discords all day, people are talking about Burning Wheel. Now people are talking about Dungeon World, and I'm like, I want to play. I want to run games. I want to play more games. I want to be running games 24/7. Dungeon World is especially after my heart because it's pretty much designed for low prep or no prep gaming, which I love the thrill of it. 7th Sea, a game system we have talked about for 20 years and have never played. What is my opinion on age systems? So the fantasy age system, I believe, was derived from the originally from the Song of Ice and Fire role-playing game system by Robert Schwalb, and I really liked it. I really liked the dice mechanics. I think this is kind of generally part of the age system, but I really liked their social mechanics. Those were really, really good. And at least in the Song of Ice and Fire system, you got to build your own house in Westeros, and you had all these really cool and interesting characters. You didn't just have to be this, this knight or this sellsword. Like, you could legitimately be a very non-combative type character and still be very effective, because in a game of Westeros, or in the story of Westeros, these sort of non-combatant characters could be very potent and powerful as well. We could always torture ourselves and play Palladium. Yeah, I think I only have one or two Rifts books, and I don't know that I've ever really dug into them. That is, I think as I have grown older, okay, and we've talked about GNS before here, but GNS theory was an old theory from early days of the internet, from a place called The Forge, which was an internet RPG Usenet group. Anyways, and this was sort of an initial feel. It got developed and tweaked and changed, and some people abandoned it, but I always thought it worked really, really well. And one of the ideas behind this GNS theory is that a game can have gaming elements, which, think of like a board game, think of like Magic the Gathering, think about real crunchy stuff, feats and mechanic, things that don't make sense in the real world and don't make sense in a story, but they're there because it's fun for the game, right? Like a 5-foot step. What is that? That's a game element. There are narrativist elements. Alignment is a narrativist element. Bonds, flaws, ideals from 5th edition are narrativist elements. These are mechanics within the context of the gaming system, but they are there to drive a story. And then lastly is simulation, which are games that are more about running. The system is designed to simulate a type of genre or a type of reality. A game that has, we've been looking at Arduin Grimoire on Discord. It has on the Discord, it has like, what is the percent chance that a rope breaks based on how far the person fell on the rope and how much weight is on the rope. That is a very simulationist aspect. It's not necessarily like a fun game thing, and it's definitely not designed for helping you tell a story, but it is there to help you simulate a reality or real world situation. GURPS is a great example of a sort of simulationist plus game. So like a heavy on the S, heavy on the G, but definitely heavy on the S. Agreed. There's a lot more personal takes I have on this theory, but the long and the short of it is, as time has gone on, I have found myself, ever since about 4th edition D&D, fading away a little bit from the simulation aspects of these games. And I am now more interested in the narrative elements and the game elements. And remember, when I say these are all under the context of role-playing game system. So when I say narrative elements, I don't mean we didn't roll dice for 2 hours. You don't need a game for that. That's not a game. That's not a game for that. A great example of a narrative element, which has never been in D&D before, is Flaws, Ideals, and Bonds. It's this idea of here are narrative components that if I played my character this way, I will be rewarded mechanically in the game with advantage, or I should say inspiration. And I'm curious what a heavy N, heavy S game would be. So heavy narrative, low simulation would be games that start to drive into the sort of realm of what we would call a storytelling game. So this would be a game that doesn't really care about simulating anything. It only cares about simulating a reality or simulating a genre convention. It only cares about promoting or advancing a story. So a game like Fiasco or, there's a certain element there of a heavy narrative game that would be maybe even Fate, right? Fate with its aspects doesn't really simulate anything. The Fate aspect system is very gamist, but you're using it to sort of enforce narrative truths about your personality. That's a stream worthy of itself, is going around and assigning. Then we start talking about, my take on GNS, where I start talking about game greatness scores, mapping GNS, trying to determine what is a level of greatness. How can you determine a game's greatness? Start plotting XY charts, trying to mathematically determine how awesome a game is. And then once so Jason asks, where would Dread fall? Right. So Dread is nothing on the simulation. It's like a zero simulation. The game mechanics are extremely simple. So it's very low gamist. What is it trying to do? It is trying, to create a narrative. The narrative of this scary ass situation. And everything in the game is pushing you and pulling you towards that moment. So Dread would be like narrative 8, game 3, simulation 0 would be what I would say it. So I would give it a GNS of 830 or a 380, which would mean its total greatness score is 11, yada, yada, yada. Okay. Let's get into some primal spells. We got 3 hours. We got 2 hours and a half left. People like to come in. We like to chat, but we got 28 spells that I want to take out. And I want to make sure that we get through these all. Here we go. Oh, gosh. All right, we got a question from Self-Confessed. Question from the Discord. How would you play a melee druid? Would you? Well, define melee druid. Do you mean a druid that is in melee when they are not wild shaping? I think that is very hard to do in Pathfinder 2. You are limited by your proficiency bonus. Strength is never going to be a very valuable store for you. You do get, wild shape focus spells. And you also get some of the other battle forms that you can use. The battle forms make you fairly competitive, but you're obviously very limited to how useful and how often you have access to those battle forms. And you're, sort of eating up a lot of actions with, the casting of those spells just to even be. Because remember, one of the precepts of Pathfinder 2, and that's fine. We can start here, by the way, because animal form is the first spell. So this actually works really well. And we can talk about we could talk about this battle form. One of the concepts of Pathfinder 2 is, well, let's compare it with Pathfinder 1, right? And to say Pathfinder 1 is to say, let's compare it with 3rd edition. Okay. In 3rd edition, the idea was that a wizard or even a cleric or a druid was not as good of a combatant as, say, a barbarian or a fighter. And that was represented by their lower hit points, and it was represented by their lower base attack bonus and all these other things. But Pathfinder 1 gave you the ability to expend magical spells, which are a limited resource per day, to gain these powerful buffs, whether it was a druid polymorphing and wild shaping or a cleric casting spells like Righteous Might or, oh goodness, what's the other one? There's another really good cleric buff spell that I can't remember. It's like a personal buff spell. And these spells, or like for a wizard, casting Tensor's Transformation. And these spells would make you, in some cases, just as good as, if not a little bit better, than maybe some of the other melee combatants. And the game was okay with that because it said, yeah, but the wizard or the cleric or the druid isn't going to have access to these things all the time. They are limited by their spells, and spells are kind of finicky, and spells can be disrupted and all this other stuff. But the fact of the matter is, that's just not the way that people played. And when they designed Pathfinder 2, they said, look, we could design this like we are with our heads in the sand and pretend that everybody is going to play role-playing games the right way. Or we could just be realistic about it and say, no, like players are going to do everything in their power to gain every possible advantage that they possibly can. If there is even the slightest possibility for them to retreat back to town, sleep, recover all their spells, they are going to do that every single time. And knowing that, we need to make it so that these spellcasters are less powerful than the melee characters who are giving up access to all of these unique spellcasting abilities. And then even if the spellcaster casts a spell that is designed to make them into an able combatant, we cannot allow them to be as good as any of these other combatants. Because otherwise, what is the point of being a barbarian, a ranger, a fighter, or whatever, if a spellcaster can be as good as they are, and teleport, and heal, and walk through walls, and fly, and summon walls of fire? You know what I mean? So it's like they designed this game to say, even when you're trying to be good at something as a spellcaster, you're never going to be as good at it as, say, a mundane character. Because otherwise, what would be the point of being that mundane character? Now, that makes sometimes magic kind of dumb and boring. And we saw this with like knock from last level, right? Where it doesn't just open the door. Instead, it gives you a bonus to opening the door or the chest. And if you're a wizard, you can maybe make a roll. And you still will probably not be as good as a thief who is expert or master in thievery and has a really good dex. They're going to still be able to outperform a wizard. And though that way, a wizard who takes knock just doesn't go, oh, cool, the thief who mastered out in thievery, and yeah, we don't need you anymore. I took knock. And the cleric took find traps. Turns out you're just kind of, all that effort that you put into being like the cool thief trap guy just doesn't matter. Multi-attack octopus polymorphs with improved grab for the win. Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why in Pathfinder 1 they called them Codzillas, right? Cleric or Druidzilla, right? Clerics and druids were busted in PF1. Even more so than wizards, I think. So they were pretty damn powerful. Jason says he wishes that his group did everything they could to gain an advantage. I don't know if you should wish that. But at the same time, Jason, I hate to tell you this, but the math of Pathfinder is kind of assuming that they are. If you have a group of characters who do not have 18s in their stat and do not attempt to flank and do not try to aid each other and don't go get a +1 or +2 potency rune at the right time when it's available, or a striking rune as soon as one gets available, or doesn't take advantage of buff spells like heroism or debuff spells like fear. Well, when they designed this game, the game designer said, okay, who plays our games? Okay, neckbeards with no friends who hate life. Okay, we are going to design our game at that level. And if you're not at that level, the game can be extremely punishing. And I would just simply say that if you don't have a group that isn't exploiting every advantage, be very careful about throwing something like a severe fight at your group, because they will have a very hard time of it. You can throw moderate and low fights at them, and maybe, you know, you're still playing the game. You're not fudging, which is, you know, a bad thing. Like, give them an opportunity to compete. But a moderate fight with a non-optimized party could actually still be very, very tough. So I would watch that. It was a great design decision if you are trying to achieve certain design goals. And I will leave it at that. Yeah, 5e polymorph is still very busted. 5e, like that game system gets a lot of praise, and it is still very fundamentally broken. Very fundamentally broken. Half of the classes don't work. and are immediately overshadowed by almost everything in the game. So we had a cleric of St. Cuthbert and named Matthias in our group, and he did more damage than anybody, even like the barbarian. Like he was the most damaging powerhouse character that you could possibly imagine. Brutus, aka the Grognard. Yes, exactly. Hey, welcome. Happy to give it to you, Walker. Oh, you're in the game. You're not the GM. So you're saying your group doesn't optimize. Well, have that conversation with them. Start up a Discord. Start up a group chat. Start up an email thread. Talk about strategies. Talk about ways that you can play off of each other. Pathfinder 2 is a team game. Yeah. Sage, it sounds like for your group, that moderate encounter, if your group isn't playing up to the standards, because of the math being so tight in Pathfinder 2, if your group isn't really playing at that optimal level, even a moderate fight can be very, very, very challenging. Even if you're playing actually completely, quote unquote, correctly, if the dice rolls go against you a little bit, even a moderate fight can be pretty brutal sometimes. 5e is a great game for being easy to play, not for being balanced or easy to GM. Agreed. It is easy to play. I will agree that. Delinquent, I am in my Pathfinder 2 game right now that I get to play on Fridays. I am playing Moss, the halfling cleric of Saren Ray, who has a free archetype as a flame order druid, and he is a cloistered cleric and took as his domain initiate sun. And so he's like really much this like ever burning flame of the sun of life to bring and destroy undead and bring back light to the dark. And I'm having a lot of fun with it. So. Oh, sorry. The shout out was bad joke about neckbeards with no friends line. I'm sorry. Listen, I'm friends with a lot of neckbeards too. Okay. Let's get into this. Oh gosh. I stirred the hornet's nest. The battle forms spells feel weird to you character theme wise because they don't all scale super well. Yeah. And we can talk about that. We can talk about that. The sun focus spell is dope, Kevin. Actually, both of them are dope. The baseline dazzling flash, A+, and then the positive luminant radiance one that you get at like the advanced domain is also really, really sweet. That spell, we read that spell. I'll be honest with you, I haven't read every single focus spell in the game. I have now, but at the time I hadn't. And Smith and I read that spell, and I showed it to him. I said, "Look at this spell!" And I explained the spell to everybody, and everyone was like, "This is in Pathfinder 2." It is the all right. We're going off book here. It is by far one of the. It's one of the strangest. I don't know what it's called. There it is. All right, here we go. Got it. Look at this spell. This is a Pathfinder 2 spell. It doesn't even seem like it should be. You draw energy into yourself, and you gain something called a luminance reservoir, which begins at 4, and then each turn as a free action, you can increase it by 4, and then the light starts spreading out from you. Anytime an undead attacks you, they take half that amount of damage equal to your positive luminance reservoir value. And then if you dismiss the spell, you can direct all of that channeled up luminance as a massive heal or to damage an undead. And then it scales the amount that it builds up each turn as you get higher and higher in level. So it's like it creates this whole new subsystem every time you cast the spell, and it's a focus spell. So you're hopefully, and it's one action. So hopefully you're casting this spell probably every fight. So now you have this new subsystem of you like building up round over round over round, this like sort of reservoir of positive energy that you could use to heal or damage undead. I don't know. It's a pretty sweet spell. I was a fan. Okay. Animal form. Ruin Smith, don't ruin my day, Ruin Smith. There's so many focus spells. Yeah, Dazzling Flash is amazing. All right. Animal form. It is one of our first battle. It's a polymorph spell. Important to note that polymorph spells, you only have one on you at a time. And if you try to cast another one on you, you have to counteract successfully the other one, or it won't even go off. So something to keep in track of. But yeah, so you get to go into what the game calls a battle form. And you basically, they use this sort of catch-all term to sort of basically be like, what is a balanced way that we can sort of give you combative abilities that don't make you horrible? Now, this is a level 2 spell, so you're casting this at level 3. Hey, thank you for the super chat. Oh, it's from our boy Vin. I honestly think they kept some of their best spell ideas for focus spells. We need to cover them someday. Agreed. And it's a shame because by definition, the focus spells are so narrow because so many people are never going to take that domain or take that weird thing that gives you access to that focus spell. But there is a lot of cool ideas for mining ideas for future content. And if you're interested in home brewing inside of the focus spells. And honestly, again, I've said this a million times, but I'm kind of over Vancian casting. I'm kind of over all that stuff.
DM Scott tipped $10. Does Bob need another camera?
Bob, thankfully, does not need another camera. Although there was a weird issue with his Bob GM'd yesterday for some of our highest level patrons, and there was a weird glitch with his camera. So I may have to go over there this weekend and fiddle around with it. Yeah, it would have to be a completely different type of video, guys. But I do agree with what Vin here said, that there is some really cool stuff there. Okay, so you spend 2 actions. It lasts for a minute, so there's a chance that you could throw this down before you get into combat. You get to, change your form to a type of animal. It's medium-sized. And again, it's flavor, right? It has no effects on its size or its statistics. So it doesn't really matter. The only thing that matters is each of these types gains a different little, kind of a minor flavor change. Like the ape gets a climb speed, right? The bear doesn't get a climb speed, but the bear gets a jaws attack, which does 2d8 piercing instead of 2d6 bludgeoning of the ape. So you have a bunch of different, interesting ideas. But it makes your AC 16 plus your level. So you're a level 3 character. You cast a spell. Boom. You get an AC of 19. Okay, well, what was my AC before this? Well, let's assume I'm a druid and I've figured out a way. I'm in medium armor. So I'm getting 5 points of AC from my, my combination of armor plus dex. I'm trained and I'm level 3. So 3 trained is 5, and my armor is probably giving me about 5. So I'm probably sitting around AC 20, 19 to 20, if I haven't figured out a way to get full 5 points of AC yet. So this gives me a little worse of AC, or just about equivalent. So it doesn't really change my AC that much. Gives me a couple temporary hit points, probably good. Now, yes, Floyd is correct. If you are unarmored or you're a light, if you're not wearing heavy or medium armor, if you're just wearing if you only have 2 or 3 points from your armor plus dex, you are gaining 2 points off of this. But anyways, you get a couple temporary hit points, which, to be fair, is probably about half a hit at this level. And you do now. I think far more important than any of these combat abilities is you gain low light, imprecise sense, and then you gain a melee attack. And the attack bonus is +9. So again, you're a level 3 character. The melee characters in your party probably have trained. Well, unless they're a fighter, they have trained. They probably are level 3 as well. They have 5, and their strength is probably 18. So they have a +9. So what does this mean? It means that for the most part, you are going to have an attack bonus that is about equivalent to your, people in your party's attack bonus. Your AC might be a little worse than theirs. You're going to get basically the equivalent of a striking rune, which they probably will have around level 3 or 4. And your damage bonus is a whopping +1. So, it's not the end of the world. I mean, it definitely makes you a better combatant than you were before, but does it make you a destroyer god of the universe? No. And before you kind of say, well, that's actually not that bad, keep in mind, you might only be able to do this a couple of times a day, at least at this level. And you had to use 2 actions just to get to that state. So in a combat, you are giving up your limited resources and you're giving up 2 actions, presumably either in the first round of combat or maybe you can get it off before the combat starts. But just to be almost kind of as good as a fighter or a barbarian or a ranger or monk, but without any of the benefits of any of the feats, the rages, the hunted prey, the stances, and all that other stuff. So, well, keep in mind here, your stats don't change, Anthony. So you are going to keep using your strength bonus, but it's probably not, it's probably not 18, right? So, the fighter might be doing 2d8 plus 4 damage, and you are doing, in bear form, 2d8, maybe your strength is 12, or something like that. So you're doing 2d8 plus 1, but this gives you a +1 damage bonus, so you're doing 2d8 plus 2. So the fighter's doing a little bit more damage than you. The fighter has a better attack roll than you. They've got 2 or 3 class feats that's going to help them be a better fighter than you. So you're casting a spell and using 2 actions so that you can be worse than any of the other martial characters. But I guess you get to be cool and you get to be a bear, right? You get some, if you look through this, the shark gives you a swim speed. The frog gives you a swim speed. The ape gives you this, So Kevin asked, how does this spell work with the hand wraps of mighty blows? I believe... Here we go. Here we go. The special statistics of a battle form can only be adjusted by circumstance bonuses, status bonuses, and penalties. Hand wraps of mighty blows give an item bonus, and that means that the hand wraps of mighty blows do not stack with this. The only thing that affects it are circumstance bonuses, like you would get from an aid action from a player, status bonuses like a bless spell or a heroism spell, and of course, any and all penalties that would apply. So generally speaking, no, they will not stack and they will not apply. So, again, is this spell horrible? Look, no, and it scales, right? This is your animal form. You get to level 3, that means you're now level 5. You gaining 10 temporary hit points, so again, probably about half-ish hit. Your AC, instead of 16 plus your level, which was here, it's now 17 plus your level, which is basically accounting for the fact that the game pretty much assumes that you now have a +1 potency rune in your armor. Your attack bonus, again, continues to scale up a little bit. So the game, it barely keeps you active. And I would say that it pretty much drops off as you get higher and higher. Your damage bonus scales up, but you are never going to be better than anybody else. Now, that being said, now hold on a sec here. Self-Confessed Cynic is saying hand wraps add to your attack bonus even in battle form, a separate Paizo ruling. Was it they changed the rules of the way that polymorph works? Because polymorph very specifically says here, if you take on a battle form, the bonuses can only be applied by circumstance, status, and penalties. And your gear is absorbed into you. You cannot activate items. So I question that. If an alchemist elixir gives an item bonus, no. So now again, we're talking about how a druid might benefit differently from this. Obviously, druids interact with this spell differently, but we are here just to judge the spell. So I don't think this spell is bad. Anthony, it does say the constant abilities of your items still apply. It does say that. Agreed. But what this thing clearly turns you into a battle form, and the description of polymorph clearly states that battle form item bonuses do not apply. So anything that is giving you an item bonus, which is typically something that's going to give you an item bonus to a skill, something that's going to give you an item bonus to your saves, something that's going to give you an item bonus to your attack roll or your armor class, none of those would apply. Those items still technically function, but item bonuses don't work. So, and yeah, look, you get big, you eventually become, at 9th level, you become huge. You've got reach, you get to double the number of damage dice. So you're doing 4d8 plus, 7 damage. It's like, okay, it's pretty cool. I don't think this spell is horrible. I'm just saying, keep it in mind that this isn't going to like make you into the most powerful defensive character of all, or offensive character of all time. And for that reason, I think it solidly lands in B. It's not an A tier spell by any stretch of the imagination. I think there are better things that you could be doing with your spell slots, but it's fun. It's flavorful. It's very much what people think of. And God, we're not even through the first spell yet. And again, this is going to give me my rant of the day, which is the problem with this is that this spell is also on the Primal list, which means like people like our own Burl, who is an elemental fire sorcerer, but they use the Primal list. So technically he can take this spell, even though it makes absolutely no sense for an elemental sorcerer to have access to this. I'm seeing some C's in the chat, B's. Self-Confessed Cynic nailed it. It gets a B because it has a very high cool factor. Remember, part of these gradings, people like, Derek is too mechanical. He only thinks about combat. Well, fuck you. I think about other stuff other than combat, okay? I think about the utility of the game, and I think about what this does for you. And I also think about how cool a spell is. Now, on coolness factor, this would be like an A, right? This is like the defining cool thing of the game. And you know what? It is very close to that, but the fact that they limited it, the fact that they bring it in, the fact that the way that the polymorph works, and the fact that they bring back down the duration to 1 minute, and the fact that this could easily eat up your whole first turn of combat, I think a B is where it's supposed to be. It helps you compete in combat. It doesn't make you better than the people who have only do the one thing of combat. And if you want to tear it up in bear form, well, this spell will get the job done. Now, it doesn't heighten past 5th. So once you go above level 10, and you start getting up into the 12s and the 13s and the 14, you're not going to get that next boost. So don't expect to be in your, late teens turning into a bear, because, by that point in time, the game assumes that you've moved on to bigger and better things. All right, next spell. What do we got? We got Animal Messenger. That is a very separate conversation, so we will definitely talk about that later. All right, Animal Messenger. We got an enchantment mental spell, but this is not a combative spell. This is a 1 minute casting time for a 120 foot range. Basically, you turn a small animal and you give it a place, a direction, and or a landmark, and it will travel there as best as it can. And you can potentially attach basically a note or other small object to it, and it tries to get there. And if it gets there, it waits for a day, or whenever somebody reaches it. I mean, it's a cool, evocative spell. Obviously, this spell goes all the way back to the beginning of the game. This is very much going back to Gandalf using the little moth from Lord of the Rings to summon Gwahir, the King of the Eagles, to come and save him. And so this has been in D&D since the very beginning of the game, because that's what cool wizard nature people do. In our game, I mean, how far a little animal can move in a day is a little bit wonky. It's not very good. But it's fun. You're probably never going to take the spell. It's obviously going to go into the scroll case. And, I don't want to punish it too harshly. I mean, it summons an animal messenger. It delivers your message to somebody. It gives you 24. I mean, think about some of these other spells that we've seen. Like if this was some of those other spells from like Gods and Magic, it would say, if the animal cannot see the target, the spell has no effect, right? Like, it doesn't heighten at all. And it's kind of sad. I mean, maybe they just didn't want you, having it go, but I think overall it's a C. It works. It does what it does. If you have it in your scroll case and that one time it comes in, I think you'll be happy with it. But most of the time, I think you can pass on this spell and not be okay. And then if it's a preparation day, remember, druids are prepared casters. They're not spontaneous casters. So they could always say, we need to warn our allies of the coming orc invasion. Okay, well, this morning, I'm going to take 3 animal messengers, and I'm going to send a raven west, east, and south to warn everyone about the coming, and you take it. And then it'll work, and you'll be happy. All right, next one. The Breath of Drought. We got an Extinction Curse spoiler. These are always bad. Sometimes. Actually, we had like one that was actually really good. All right, we got a 30-foot, so we got a close range burst. These are always a little bit tricky, but it does sustain. The area gets real hot. Oh my God, just reading the spell makes me feel uncomfortable. Each creature in the area when it's cast or it ends their turn there has to make a fort save. Water creatures, 1 degree worst. And if they succeed, it's unaffected, but it is an AoE burst. If they fail, they're sickened 1, and if they critical fail, they're sickened 2. And remember, sickened is tied to its own internal duration. In other words, the fact that the spell is sustained, if you get a creature sickened 1 or sickened 2, and then the spell ends, they are still sickened 1 or sickened 2 until they until they retch. They also heighten, which is pretty nice. So that when you sustain it, you can move it. And finally, it heightens all the way out to 120 foot and a 20-foot range at very high. So this is, I think, the best AoE sicken spell that we have seen in the game yet. Now, the fact that it's sustained is fairly moderate because it's a short range, a small burst. Most creatures are going to probably only realistically be affected by this spell once, but they could be affected twice. So we can certainly account for that. But Sicken is a nasty condition. I mean, Sicken gives you the exact same penalties as Frightened, and in my opinion is worse because it doesn't go away automatically, and trying to get rid of it eats up an action, and they have to make a DC. And there's also this weird benefit that when they're sickened, they can't ingest liquids, so they can't use elixirs or potions. This spell actually isn't that bad. I kind of like it. It heightens nice too. And it's not in cap. I mean, high level, 120 foot, 120 foot range, 20 foot burst, AoE sicken. That's actually pretty good. It's actually pretty good. So I like it at B, and I think it's a very strong, solid B. So awesome. We don't really get too many of these AP spells that are actually pretty good, but that one's actually pretty good. Ruinsmith, I want to address what Ruinsmith said. He said, makes me think could be a low key, has mirrors to the fear spell. The distinct difference of it though is that there's some instances where you're not going to be able to really use this because it is a burst. It will affect your allies as well. Fear affects one target and then it's level 1. But then when it heightens and you get multiple targets, you get to pick them individually. And so you can kind of cast it once the group is mixed in. Like you guys are imagining the ceiling and you're not thinking about the floor, right? The ceiling of this situation is my Druid 1 initiative. All the enemies are right there. Boom. I'm in a hallway. They're going to get hit by this multiple times. But the other situation is like, oh, I rolled low on my initiative, and when my turn comes, my allies and the enemies are all mixed up into melee, and I don't really have any good targets. Elixirs of potions, elixirs or potions. That's a new one. Potion of elixir. The new one is the elixir of potion. I don't know what that does. I am like 99% sure, Ryan. I don't know. That was my understanding. Yeah. I mean, it looks like It's my understanding. I mean, the same way that, a frightened spell, it hits you and it just goes away. I mean, as the fear goes away. I think it's the same way. So I believe I'm correct as well. And you know what? What do we know here? Okay, I came up with a new paradigm. We've all heard of Occam's razor, right? When given the choice between two possibilities, the simplest answer is most often the correct one. Well, we determined that there is a new determination, which is called Jason's razor, or perhaps Paizo's razor, which is whenever given the choice of a rules interpretation between the one that will make the character seem cool and powerful versus the one that will make the character seem weak and is very lame, 99% of the time in Pathfinder 2, the interpretation of the rules which limits the character, doesn't let something stack, and makes the character lame is almost always the right one. So when in doubt, Bruinsmith is probably correct, but at my table, you would be sickened because screw the way that they try to hamper our fun. That was one of my rants I want to go on today. I got a couple rants. I want to get through some spells first before I get to some rants. So,
Steven tipped $10. Paizo's razor.
All right, Paizo's razor. Okay, Paizo's razor. Yes. So when in doubt, whenever, yes. When in doubt, lame it out. Yes, Steven. That is correct. Steven was part of that conversation, so he understands Paizo's razor. Yes, the rule of uncool. That is actually 100% correct. And I 100% understand why they do it. I just think it's horrible. And I also agree with Kevin. The sustain there is so that people who might get hit by it again as continue to have the area. All right, Claw Song. We got a new one from Strength of Thousands. It's another spoiler. By the way, the only thing for people who said that spell was an A, I think you might even be right, but it is range 30. That's a very short range for a spell like that. But you know what? Play with it. Tell us in the Discord. Join the Patreon if you're not already. Most of you are. But let us know. Does that spell kick ass? I don't know. I'm a free archetype druid, so I'm still a couple levels behind before I can get a level 2 spell. But I'll definitely try it. I'll try it out. Here we go. Target is one willing creature with an unarmed claw strike. We are heading towards F territory already. We sing a fierce prayer. We evoke the ancient speech of the Turwa beast. The claws attacked gains versatile and deals 1d6 slashing damage. And if it already dealt slashing damage, it deals 1d8 slashing damage. And if it already had the versatile piercing trait, it gains the deadly d8 trait. Well, props for being deadly d8. Lucky does have a claw strike, Anthony. And Eon Rider is correct. This is outright worse than Magic Fang, with the exception that it can heighten. But do you have 6 claws? You do if you're in the AP and you're some sort of, villain or NPC that probably has like a pack of, cheetah or jaguar or something, and you need to cast this all. It's garbage. It's sustained. F. Okay. F tier GM slot. All right. I think we could just say it's F. I gave F to Slow Skin because that was such a unique, horrible combination of horribleness. All right. Bark Skin. A great example of a spell that is perfect for Pathfinder 2 in that it does something. It's interesting, but it is so balanced and so minimal as to almost be pointless. So here we go. It's 10 minutes, 2 actions, pretty cool. They get resistance to 2 bludgeoning and piercing, and they get weakness 3 to fire, which weakness 3 to fire, sure, that's going to come up now and again. But for the most part, they are taking 2 less damage per bludgeoning and piercing damage strike, which is, a good number of the types of damage you're going to take, and obviously not the slashing. this works, but it is so uninspiring. It's so boring. Now, granted, 5th edition is the one where Barkskin just gives you a certain AC. That's also a snooze fest. So, I mean, at least they try to do something different than this, than just giving you armor class, which is what it did in Pathfinder 1 as well. It's just, it's like backstabber trait on a dagger. It's like, give me something that feels impactful. By the time you cast this spell, you know, creatures are dealing, you know, with critical hits and stuff. They're already starting to deal 15, 20 damage a hit. It's, you know, and I'm giving up a spell, and I'm giving up 2 actions. And I guess this lasts for 10 minutes. So, you know, it is something, but it is, it's not all that impressive, to be honest with you. I'm going to give it a C, because in Pathfinder 2 land, this spell works. You can heighten it, you know, by the time, all right, if you've been watching our APs, okay, if Burl had this spell, which you could take, because he's a fire elemental sorcerer, but because they get primal, he could take this spell. He would be casting this spell. He could use up one of his 4th level spell slots. He has access to 5th level spell slots, but he could use one of his 4th level spell slots, you know, the ones he currently takes to take heightened fireballs and walls of fire. And he could take Barkskin, and he could give someone in the party resistance 4. Now, if you watched last Tuesday, you know that they were getting hit for 40 to 50 damage, sometimes 80 damage on a crit. Minus 4. And I'm glad I used one of my highest, you know, anything that's coming from your top 2 spell levels. So for the Knights of Last Call, who are currently 10th level, they have access to 5th level magic, 4th level magic, etc. Anything from the 5th and 4th level spell, I consider to be your premium tier. And they're taking 4 off. Ugh. It's just not exciting. And I agree, this is Paizo's ideal spell, because it's not exciting, because it's so it's been balanced into boring. You know, good for a dungeon crawl, adds up over time, but with the 10-minute duration, 99% of the time when a combat is over, you're going to spend at least 10 minutes to regain focus spells and to at least make 1 treat wounds check. So for a lot of times, this is really only going to affect 1 combat. So it's not great. Matthew, I'm not going to give the spell a D. You're not wrong if you take the spell, because in a long, prolonged fight against a lot of lesser creatures, you know, the types that I like to throw at my party, but don't really work well in Pathfinder 2, because if you have 7 or 8 or 9 monsters on the GM side, you're talking about going through 30 plus actions around between you and the PCs, or more actually. And it's just going to take you 2 hours to get through a moderate fight. But if you are fighting, and they never put those in the APs because they would be very overwhelming for the GM. It would take up a lot of space and print space that they would otherwise rather just throw a single monster severe at you or 2 monsters severe at you. But if you are fighting that fight where you're fighting, let's say, 8 monsters of the party's level -4, then this spell probably is a lot better. You're getting nickeled and dimed more, and these creatures might only be doing 6 or 7 points of damage apiece. And so suddenly having resistance 2 could really make a big difference. But in that situation, I think it's okay. Yes, pre-buffing is definitely the way that this spell is intended to be done. I agree with that. I mean, I think most of the 10-minute spells, the idea is you get to cast the spell before the fight. 1-minute spells, I think their idea is that you cast it during the fight and then it lasts for the whole fight. And I suppose there's a world in which you could pre-cast Barkskin, get into a combat, not treat wounds, not recover focus points, and then somehow get into a second fight and make your way through that. And then you're getting really good value for this spell. And by that point in time, maybe it's resisted enough damage to be better than just a level 2 heightened heal spell, which is healing for 2d8 plus 16. So an average of 24 damage. So, you know, it's resisting 2. So if you get hit 12 times with this, on the 13th time for this, it will have resisted more damage than you could have just healed with a heal spell. So, oh, and it only works against 2/3 of the types of damage, but you also take extra damage from fire. So, sorry. Okay, I was just writing a note to myself. All right, what is next? We got Enhance Victuals. I think I remember what this spell does. Now, look, we had all these spells, by the way, that were part of our wizard list, too. So, a lot of crossover between Arcane level 2 and Primal level 2. But not Enhanced Victuals. It's from the core rulebook. They felt this needed to be in Pathfinder from the beginning. It takes 1 minute, and you could target a gallon of water, or you could target 5 pounds of food, and it lasts for an hour. You make it delicious. That shit's delicious. You just, boop. It's wine. Change that water into wine. Look at that. You were just going full Jesus on them. And it also can potentially counteract any poisons. It tempts. It tempts to counteract. But then it turns back into poison. So. Oh, you can heighten this bad boy. Oh, if you're an 18th level druid, 19th level druid, you can definitely you could definitely do the whole party. You're like, look at that, 10 gallons. Very fun, flavorful, useless. Who said S tier, Floyd? Look at the enhance grid 3A, enhance the victuals. Right. Well, Ruinsmith, you can heighten any spell in order to counteract, and we'll actually get to that in a second. We're gonna get to those. We're gonna have a rant about the remove spells. That's gonna be a rant that we're gonna do first. There's 3 rants planned tonight. One of them is the remove spells. Matthew says D scroll. I'm not even going to give it the honor of that. Just don't even put this in your scroll belt. All right. Entangle. Once the MVP of the Druid world, once the level 1 encounter ender, if you actually encountered anything outdoors. Right before we really got involved in Pathfinder 2 and the channel blew up, and I got kind of busy because of that. I was running a Pathfinder 1 campaign. Yes, I was running the Pathfinder 2 for the AP when the channel was just the AP, and I was also running a Pathfinder 1 game, and I was running the Pathfinder 1 version of Rapana Thuk from Frog God Games. And that game has a very old school sensibility to it, and the party was trying to make their way to the dungeon. Now, we played several sessions. They never even made it to the dungeon, because the overworld encounter was so tough. And they had heard rumors that there was Gnoll raiding parties in the region. And sure enough, one of these Gnoll hunting parties had discovered them, and they fought off a couple of them, but those were just scouts. And the next night they awoke and found that the whole war party had descended upon them. It was like they were level 1 or 2 characters, and maybe they were level 2. And a Gnoll is like a CR1, and there was like 18 Gnolls. They were outside at distance, and the druid had Entangle. And not a Gnoll lived to return to tell them what happened that day, because Entangle is really, really powerful. Let's see how this one holds up. Well, right off the bat for a level 2 spell, I'm impressed. Okay? This is a zone, which typically is 3 actions. We've seen this before with Obscuring Mist. Okay? This is only 2 actions. It's got great range for 120 feet. The only thing that really beats that is like your Fireball type spell. And I think Fireball has the range on Fireball is too long. They only did it because it's Fireball and because of Sacred Cows. Fireball has too far of a range. Area, all squares in 20-foot radius that contain plants. Again, this spell is not designed to be used indoors. It never was. And I think you could be pretty loose with the interpretation of this. Grass, weeds, but if you're in the desert or an obviously barren place, it is not going to work. 20-foot radius burst, 1 minute, and the entire that is a big range. That is a big radius. Okay, that is, you could potentially have 30 feet between you and the party of just entangled, difficult terrain. That's 60 feet to cover. Now, one thing which we haven't really talked about enough on this channel, though, is whenever Paizo writes an adventure and whenever you convert anything from an old game, or you're thinking about the way that you used to play Pathfinder, or even the way that you play 5th edition D&D, remember that everybody in Pathfinder 2 is 50% faster, or in some cases twice as fast as they were in the older versions of the game, because you can move and then attack. It's like in 5th edition terms, everybody has cunning action, whatever the rogue ability is that lets you dash as a bonus action. So everybody can double move and attack. And even if you're not charging or doing anything like that. Whereas in the old versions of the game, you could either double move or you could move and attack. So everybody moves a lot faster in this version of the game. But starting their turn in the area, they have to make that reflex save. If a fail, they get a minus 10 foot movement penalty to their speed. That means a lot of people are going to be down to a 15-foot speed in an area that contains all difficult terrain. They are going to be spending rounds possibly trying to escape from this, and to say nothing of the fact that if they crit fail, they're immobilized, which is what you would want this spell to do. But quite frankly, if it was failure immobilize, this spell would be busted. But regardless of the reflex save, yeah, Ian Ryder made a great point, and I tried to lead with that. Regardless of the reflex save, it's still all difficult terrain. Difficult terrain, minus 10 speed, big burst, no sustain. Sure, it's not S tier because of the plants. But you can get around that, okay? And it's not sustained. Now, there is a problem in Pathfinder 2, which is it's hard to be, like if you're Azius and you're a big melee character who has all their points in strength, or you're a full plate wearing fighter, so you didn't really pump your dex up because you're not going to get any benefit from it to your armor class, and the bulwark ability sort of helps out with your reflex save, you are going to suck with ranged weapons. You are just going to suck with ranged weapons. But I think this spell still, now in Pathfinder 1, this spell would have been an S tier spell. But here, especially because in Pathfinder 1 too, I don't know, maybe I feel like random encounters still existed in Pathfinder 1. I mean, technically they still exist in Pathfinder 2, or they could exist, but none of the APs really mention them, and the rulebook doesn't really talk about them either. But assuming you're outside and you have people who can really take advantage of this, it would be an S tier, but I think it gets an A tier. I think the spell actually still performs pretty well. I think that's going to do what you want it to do most of the time. And for that kind of duration, at that kind of range, with that kind of area, for no sustain at 2 actions, you are getting a lot of bang for your buck. And the best part about it is, sure, eventually monsters will teleport and fly, but this doesn't even need to heighten. It's always going to be at your DC in order to escape. It's always going to immobilize and entangle at your DC. So I think it's great. I'm really excited about this spell. I think it's good. Okay. So last time we talked about Glitter Dust when we were playing the Wizards list, and Glitter Dust is still a spell for the for the Druid. It is a B tier scroll because it does what it does. It helps you see invisible people, and there's a save involved, and they get to make a reflex save to avoid the glitter. Fairy Fire has a longer range, a 10-foot burst. It lasts 5 minutes. Glitter Dust, by the way, it lasts 1 to 2 rounds. And there's no save. Okay? They just get hit by it. For starters, they are limed in heatless fire. So in the instance where the monsters were so far away, let's say I have dark vision, I can see the monsters because they're 100 feet away, but nobody else in my party can because they're humans and the range of our torchlight doesn't go that far. Okay, fine. Hit them with Fairy Fire. There's no save. They are now glowing. So everybody's going to be able to see them. Any creature that is hit by this can't be concealed. And if they're invisible, they count as being concealed instead of being completely undetected. This spell, this spell is amazing. This spell with no save at 120 feet, like, that spell's great. There's a lot of uses for this, especially if your GM really enforces the lighting rules as well. It lasts for 5 minutes, which seems way too long. I don't even know why this spell lasts 5 minutes. I had it in a scroll last session. I cast it on a creature that had concealment or invisibility. I don't think I would ever prep it, but I mean, this might be like an S tier scroll. I never even thought we would have an S tier scroll because that's why I put the name title here. I really think this scroll is so good. It doesn't matter what level it is. You're gonna fight invisible people throughout the course of the game and concealed people, and you just boom, bloop, you hit them with the fairy fire. There's no save. It could be a boss. It could be the invisible stalker. It could be Karzug casting a 10th level invisibility spell. It doesn't matter. There's no save against this. So we're going to break the rule here. Somehow we've managed to find an S tier scroll. I think every caster who can cast this spell, which is, by the way, everyone but a wizard, or arcane caster, I should say, they should all have one of these tucked away in their back pocket, you know? And if there's a situation where it comes in, you just one action, bloop, pull that bad boy out, and then you cast it. And you're going to be real happy that you did. Like, I feel like this is a must-have in your back pocket. And once you get to the level where, I think a level 2 scroll is like 7 gold. So once you have, you know, when you're getting hundreds of gold per fight, like, just have one or two of these. And yeah, total entropy. If you have nothing else to do with your level 2 scroll slot or a level 2 spell slots, because you have so many of them, just throw one in there too. Again, it scales perfectly. It doesn't need to heighten. It's really good. Steven, I think in the inherently, we understand that a scroll is always going to take an action. So, I mean, part of being in the scroll tier is the understanding that if I'm fighting multiple invisible enemies and my turn consists of one action, pull it out, 2 actions, now they're all visible for my entire party, I think we're okay with that. So that is where I would counter that. One of the reasons why like summoning is bad is because summoning spells are 3 actions. They don't make good scroll, or obscuring mist is 3 actions. Those don't make good scrolls because you're going to end up in this wonky situation where you can't use it the turn you pull it out. So you have to like pull it out a round in advance. I'm not going to lie. Prior to Pathfinder 2, so all of my 3rd edition games, all of my Pathfinder 1 games, we always allowed like 5 slot, maybe it varied from campaign to campaign, but we would always allow like 4 slot, 5 slot, or maybe eventually like 8 slot bandoliers. And basically you could put potions, you could put scrolls in them, and we made it a free action to pull out one of your 8 pre-slotted items from your bandolier. Anything else, you had to use an action to go dig it out of your pouch or whatever like that. But if you had it in your bandolier, it's like you had quick draw for one of those scrolls or potions or elixirs. Josh, I think that's great. I cannot fault you at all for that. I'm putting it, if it is an S tier scroll, it's honestly probably like an A tier, A minus, maybe B plus tier actual spell. And if you're that high level where level 2 scroll spell slots aren't even that important anymore, you know, I think that sounds great. Yeah, I don't know if it breaks the stupid action economy of Pathfinder 2 or whatever, but scroll quick draw. Oh, you know what that sounds like? That would be a cool thing of a skill feat. Come on. All right. Feral Shades. It's going to be super edgy. All right, here we go. It's a 30-foot cone. You summon negative energies. This sounds very primal. It's primal only. Okay. It's a necromancy primal spell where you're summoning negative energy. But it's primal because it briefly takes the shape of a pack of dogs. So, self-confessed cynic just hit upon an interesting thing here where he says, I think the Skull Trickster gets a scroll quick draw feat. Maybe. And one of the reasons I hate adding a ton of stuff to the game is because every time you add something to the game, you're basically saying this is now something you can't do unless you have this thing. And it makes it harder for GMs to feel like they can make rulings because now there's a rule for everything. And then you go, oh, okay, I'll pick that up. And you're like, okay, well, you need a dedication and you need to finish your current dedication. And then you need to go and take 5 feats into the, it's like, I just want to be able to pull a scroll out, man. Also, like, if that's what, yeah, I mean, Anthony says you really need an archetype for that. Like, if what's cool about your archetype is that you can pull a scroll out fast, what are we doing here? Like, the gunslinger has a feat that lets them shoot the guns at the ground and blast off like a rocket ship. And I get a feat that lets me pull out a scroll fast. What is wrong with this equation? What is wrong with this with these rules balancing? Anyways, okay. Feral Shades is a 30-foot cone, which creates a necromantic wave of dark energy. But because they look like dogs, it is primal only. They deal 2d4 slashing, 2d4 negative damage. The shades set upon the vulnerable with great ferocity. Anyone who is prone or anyone taking persistent bleed damage gets a -2 penalty to the save. Well, prone comes up sometimes. Persistent bleeding damage far less often. So I think we can safely, ignore that. But you could deal 2d4 plus 2d4, so 4d4. But Burning Hands at this level is doing 4d6 in a 15-foot cone. So Burning Hands does 4d6 in a 15-foot cone. This is doing 44 in a 30-foot cone. It's probably okay. 30-foot cone's a lot different than a 15-foot cone. I'm going to give it a B. Well, Phoenix, I'm allowed to bitch. I mean, it is the way that it is. It's not that it has a rule for everything. It's that by definition, when the game first came out, you could do what was in the core rule book. Anything that wasn't in the core rule book was potentially something you could do. As more and more and more things get released in the game, you, by definition, can no longer do those things unless you have that thing. And so it becomes more restricted. By the end of an edition, this was my problem with Pathfinder 1. By the end of Pathfinder 1, there were so many rules that if I wanted to make a ruling, I didn't even know if that was already something that was in the game. And, you worry about this quantum player who's not even in your game, or no one is even that class or that archetype. And suddenly you're worried about what they may have taken if they were in your game. And it's just a weird situation. I mean, if you don't care about game balance, then it doesn't matter at all. So, and I'm all for that. If you don't care about your game balance, A-okay. I mean, I play with Derek hero points, so obviously, the prone and persistent bleeds are a thing. I'm giving it the benefit of the doubt. That, I mean, -2 penalty is not nothing, but Feral Shades really needs to be considered as Burning Hands was A tier, and so this is a little bit less damage, but it's 30-foot cone. I think the less damage doing less damage outweighs and not being fired outweighs the other thing. It doesn't work against undead and stuff, but and it heightens okay, basically 2d4 per level, so it's okay. It is consistent, which is nice. All right, what's next? Okay. Fungal hyphae. Fungal hyphae. It's from our favorite book, Gods and Magic. All right. Duration's 1 minute. You grow a symbiotic fungal network that attaches you to the plant's root systems within 30 feet of you. You gain imprecise tremor sense, allowing you to sense anything directly touching. But if you move, the spell ends. You can heighten it, which gives you the ability to make attacks. I mean, the baseline spell is horrible. right? We can all agree that. So the baseline spell is pretty bad. But if you heighten it, you can make strike actions to any creature within 30 feet of you. They are melee spell attacks that do 2d8 bludgeoning damage, but something like a thorn might do a different type of damage. And then you're casting that at 7th level. You know, here's what I'm going to do. It would be an F, but at heightening, it gets a little bit cooler. I mean, by that point in time, again, let's be real here. At level 6, the druid is growing fungus through their feet, and now they can kind of like make the plants within 30 feet of them, you know, wiggle a little bit and maybe open a door. And other characters can now teleport and raise the dead. So let's have some sense of perspective. Yeah, you could use this to detect invisible creatures. You could also use the fairy fire spell that we just talked about. So because of its heightening, I am just going to put it to D. It is cool. But like, again, this just feels to me like something that, I don't know, could be a skill feat or something that druids can just do. I don't know. Uh, 2d8 plus spell modifier at level 7 isn't that bad. It kind of is, though, because your spell modifier is still attacking armor class, and your spell attack modifier is always going to lag behind armor class. So this is really like making a spell attack roll like you would for, you know, Acid Arrow or for Horizon Thundersphere, except instead of doing 12d6 or 10d6 damage, you're only doing 2d8. It's pretty bad. All right, we got more fungus. Trust the fungus. Fungal infestation. From APG. We got a range touch 15-foot cone. Interesting. They deal, see, we've talked about this a million times. I hate this kind of spell language. I hate this language. Whoever decided on this formatting for things, these creatures, these noxious growth deal 2d6 persistent poison damage, and each creature must attempt a fortitude save. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, so they're taking 2d6 persistent poison damage, and then let's find out what else happens based on the save. And you're like, oh, they crit, then they're unaffected. They're unaffected by what? They're unaffected. Oh, I get, okay, so they didn't take the 2d6 persistent damage. Why wouldn't it just say, toxic spores swarm all of the area, causing them to erupt and grow fungal growth. Each creature must attempt a fortitude save, and then just list it. Why would you put this here? Why is this here? And why is this not, like, here? The target takes the full persistent poison damage. Just say the target takes 2d6 persistent poison damage. Don't put it here. You're making me self-reference within the same damn spell. You can't even... I'll probably have to flip to the back of the book, too. But, like, why? The editing on this is horrible. All right. Anyways, sorry. It's like they purposely did this to be confusing, Jason. They really did. All right, 2d6 persistent poison damage. Is that good? Well, okay. Yes, that is good. If they succeed, they're only taking half. So that's 1d6 persistent poison damage in a cone. Okay. If they fail, they're taking 2d6 persistent poison damage, which is pretty good. And then they have weakness 1 to fire, weakness 1 to slashing. It's like, again, it's like, you know, if you've watched our AP, like if you've played Pathfinder 2, you understand that like every one of these little things is just adding another. And it's like, I'm okay to take the extra step because I want to, you know, aid and I want to cast heroism and I want to add these bonuses up and I want to make a difference. But like tracking 1 point of extra damage is just so pointless. I would like rather this didn't even have this here. It's just annoying. But you know what Total Entropy said? You think it's because of basic saves, but we have seen spell descriptions that say saving throw, fortitude, basic, which everybody knows means on a crit, you take nothing. On a thing, you take half. On a thing, you take the full. And on a crit fail, you take double. And yet it'll have a table still that says on a crit fail, you take an additional benefit. It's just do the persistent poison to be done with it. We don't need these little piddly amounts of weakness damage. Now it's just one more thing that we have to track that, quite frankly, probably you and your players are going to forget about anyways because it's so little. Why are we even sparing the mental RAM to keep this up? But okay, we have a 15-foot cone that does 2d6 persistent poison damage. Now remember, that's a burning hands, but it has to hit them twice. It's going to hit them once, assuming they fail, right? If they fail, okay, then they're going to take 2d6. And then there is a 75% chance, and then they're going to take that they'll shake it off. And then they're going to take another 2d6, and now we are equal with a burning hands, which did 46. Now it's poison damage versus fire damage, and that could, matter. But there's only a 25% chance that they're going to make that save. So 25% of the time, you're going to cast a spell, and it's going to do less damage than a burning hands. But 75% of the time, it's going to do the same amount of fire damage as a burning hands, or even more.
Jason B tipped $10. Make a basic will save, but on a critical success you are plus grabbed, success you are engulfed, see rupture, failure ferocity, and critical failure as success, but also see the plague zombie strike. That probably is a spell in Pathfinder too. Thank you, Jason B. Appreciate your game design and appreciate your thoughts on that new piece. Plus grab, which again we got rants to get to. All right, 25% of the time of the work it works 75% of the time. Okay, well I'm going to say that this is probably like Feral Shades. Probably it's about equivalent to a Burning Hand spell, but maybe a little worse. But it's okay. Plus grab. Okay, moving on. We got Guiding Star. Won't you be my guiding star? That's a Madonna song, except it's Lucky Star. Dock points for the unnecessary add-ons. Honestly, if it didn't have that, maybe it would have been an A. And I am docking it points and making it a B. All right, Guiding Star. From Secrets of Magic, the range is planetary. Well, we gotta respect that. If nothing else, we have to respect a planetary range. If they're on a different planet in the Golarian solar system, we're SOL. But if they're on Golarian, we're gonna find them. And it's got to be a creature you've met, and it lasts until your next preparation. You call on the constellations to guide you. Each time the target views the stars, it receives a mental nudge towards your location, though it is not compelled to follow. So we've got another sort of Christian analog spell here. I don't even know how to rate this spell. Obviously, this is a flavor spell. This is a GM spell, right? Wouldn't it be great, like, if somebody cast it on you and then, like, you follow the star for, like, a couple days, and then, like, on the third day, they just stop casting the spell, and then you're like, damn it, now I don't know what to do. So it's obviously a pretty cool GM spell. I don't know if it's an A tier GM spell. I'm going to agree with Floyd. It's like a B tier GM slot. We should do that, Amber Fiend. We should do that, Phoenix. Let me see if I've got. I don't know. I don't know if we do. Oh, I was gonna see if I had domain. Let you know. Here we go. Get some synth. All right. We are now synthing away from the guiding star. Okay, moving back. Karaoke of the Last Call. I love it. All right, so moving on. What do we got? Guiding Star. GMB. We like it. Okay. Impart
Empathy. This spell probably not going to be one of my favorite. So you impart upon this spell. Oh, these poor spells. You impart upon the ability for one day to understand social cues that are beyond your comprehension. Okay. It's from the Quest for the Frozen Flames. Spoiler. GMD. Even in the realm of GM, this is pretty bad. By the way, if you want to be an audio nerd like Self-Confessed Cynic and Ben here, feel free to join our Discord by signing up for the Knights of Last Call Patreon. We have a channel dedicated to audio files and nerdy audio guys who like synths and all those Moog stuff, and I don't even know what all that stuff is, but Ben will tell you. Yeah, I mean, this spell is obviously, it's from Quest of the Frozen Flame, which we know is about the people in the realm of the Mammoth Lords, and it's obviously like a spell to help people integrate into a strange or weird society. It's like a GM spell. It's not really a player spell. It's very much a setting-specific, role-playing specific spell. It's nothing that you're ever really going to need or want or have to take. Also, it doesn't actually help, like if you had a player in your group who was an introvert, it's not like it actually helps them become more extroverted. Like you're like, oh, I cast a spell on you. You're now understand all social cues. Like the player's still gonna be like, okay, I don't actually. Oh my God, does it specify animals? Please don't. Oh, okay. Okay. I have moved it to F tier. For anybody who's a member of the Patreon, this is all tied to that moose conversation I was having before. Okay, F, GMF, only works against animals. All right. Pack attack, not to be mistaken with map attack. All right, we're gonna do this, and then I'm gonna rant for a little bit. We're gonna talk a little bit about Pathfinder. We're gonna talk a little bit about mechanics and about certain things that I think are just horribly designed. And maybe we're doing this so we can learn, so that we can grow, and that hopefully the next time. So we got another one from Quest for the Frozen Flame. It is a 2-action touch for you and one willing creature. It's sustained, so you're burning an action every round to keep this up. You and the other target gain uncanny coordination. You and that target may flank any enemy to which you are both adjacent, whether or not you are on opposite sides of the enemy spaces. And then you can heighten it up to 4 willing creatures. Anthony is correct. This spell literally is a feat, but this spell actually isn't that bad until you realize that it is range touch, and until you realize that the duration is sustained. That makes this spell horrible. This makes this spell absolutely atrocious. Like that spell normally would be a D, but being a combination of touch and sustained, it's like the effect was already the spell was already on thin ice, and then those two things just buried it. All right, well, 10, 11, 12, 13. We only got 14 to go. So I want to talk really quick about the way that they have decided to use naming conventions inside Pathfinder 2. And this happened to a good friend of ours, Mr. William Brandis, a.k.a. Aaron Smith, Knight of Last Call, who, of course, is a very knowledgeable and experienced player and GM. But I have had the advantage of running a lot more Pathfinder 2 than he has. And we were playing Pathfinder 2, and we had these zombies who were coming up, and they were attacking us, and they were attacking us, and then they were grabbing us. And I noticed suddenly, I was like, oh, wait, what is happening? He goes, oh, they're grabbing you. And I said, okay. Does it say plus grab? He goes, yeah, they're damaged. It says they have a strike. It says claws, and it says 1d6 plus 6 slashing damage plus grab. And I'm like, right. Now, I understand that grab is a condition, and so it makes sense the same way that if it said 1d6 plus 6 plus 1d6 persistent bleeding damage. You would think, oh, it's just adding on 1d6 points of persistent bleeding damage because it says plus. Plus grab doesn't actually make you grab. And okay, well, what does it do? It says plus grab. There's nothing else in the monster. There's no other ability that references grab. There's no page number to look up. It doesn't even say anything about it. So I'm assuming it's the condition, right? No. It is a universal bestiary monster rule, which is located in the back of the book. Now, this particular creature, a zombie, has no page reference to this number. This ability does not reference this lookup at all. It just says 1d6 plus 6 slashing damage plus grab. You have to know that that doesn't mean that the creature is grabbed. You need to know. And now you might be thinking too, you're like, oh, I'm familiar with some of these abilities. Doesn't the fighter have something like combat grab? Doesn't that work the same way? Don't they? Yes, they do. But that's not what plus grab does. Plus grab doesn't mean that they are grabbed. Plus grab means that they have the grab ability. And then when you go look up the grab ability, you see that it says, oh, if they hit with that strike, now they can spend an action to grab the person for free. They don't have to make an athletics check, but it still takes an action. Okay? It is so intrinsically and stupidly worded. Now, furthermore, to point, if we take a look at Pathfinder 2, if we take a look at the athletics action, the athletics skill, okay? Look at something like this, okay? You have an action called grapple, okay? And it says requirements. You have at least one hand free or you have your target grappled, okay? What is grappled? Because if you click on grapple, it references grabbed. Now, I'm on Archives of Nethys, so apparently Archives of Nethys is smart enough to know that grapple and grab in the context of Pathfinder 2 all mean roughly the same thing. But there is no such thing as the grappled condition. So how can I have my target grappled? I can have my target grab, but I can't have my target grappled. In fact, when you click on grappled, which is underlined, it takes you to grabbed. Now, this might be confusing to you because it says you have your target grappled or restrained. Well, if you click on restrained, it takes you to the restrained condition, but grappled takes you to the grabbed condition. So, to be clear, we have grapple, which grabs you, which is not grab, from the monster ability, which doesn't work like any of this. Instead, it's its own thing, which you need to know that it exists, and you have to look it up in the back of the action of the bestiary book. And you have to know that it's there, because otherwise you're going to get it wrong, because there's nothing in that monster entry that says all they had to do was in the monster's entry, put a line of text. And here's the hard part. Don't use the word grab. Don't use the word that you're already using for a condition. It's like, come up with a different word. So horrible, just a horrible use. Now they do the same thing with knockdown. Now at least knockdown is a different word, right? Knockdown is like, okay, it does 1d6 plus 6 plus knockdown. And then you look at the monster stat block and you don't see any reference of knockdown. All they had to do was add on to the monster action, little action symbol, knockdown. The target is knocked prone. That's all they had to do. Instead, it's in the back of the book. It's one line. It adds an inordinate amount of confusion. But at least knockdown isn't called like prone or something. Instead, at least knockdown is, you can tell it's something different because you're like, I don't know what the knockdown condition is. Granted, that being said, there's probably a lot of people who just go, oh, okay, 1d6 plus 6 bludgeoning and knockdown, okay, I guess you're knocked prone. But no, it's actually a separate ability that you have to reference. And as somebody else came up too, there's also improved grab and there's also improved knockdown, which work differently. And yes, grabbed and grab are different words. If we are being technical, that is true. But again, I referenced this thing here, which talks about being grappled. You know, your target is grabbed, which is the state of being in the condition of grab. Lance Quagmire asks, are those condition monster abilities on the DM screen? They are not. The grab condition is, though. And David, I think you're exactly right. Now, I kind of smiled and I explained to my very intelligent, very skilled, very proficient GM last Friday what was actually going on. And the reason I knew this is because I had to learn the hard way too, that is not how that works at all. And so it's just very, very poor choice of words and wording and the way that they have chosen to do this. And I'll give you another great example though, because again, with the name and the wording, if we look up knockdown, maybe you've been a player. Okay. So you go, oh, okay. Actions, knockdown. Okay. Feats, knockdown. Okay. Yeah. Like a fighter. I know that feat. Okay. What's it do? It's 2 actions. It's from the Mauler or from the fighter ability. And right, I get to make an attack. And then I immediately swallow if I make a melee strike. And if it hits and deals damage, I can attempt an athletics check to trip the creature you hit. We've all seen fighters do this, right? And it's called knockdown. And involves making a strike, hitting, and then making an athletics check to trip the creature you hit. But then you have an exact same ability, and it's one of those secret abilities because no creature will actually have this ability. It's in the back of the book under Universal Creature Rules, called knockdown. And it works differently. Instead, there is no check. Instead, it's 2 separate actions. Their strike had to have hit, and then it's just they are knocked prone. There is no athletics check. So they are called the same thing. There's knock down the creature ability and knock down the fighter ability. And apparently there's also knock down the animal companion ability. But in this case, knock down the animal companion ability is similar to the knock down the universal creature rule ability, which is not the same as the knockdown feat that maybe a bunch of more people would be more familiar with. So again, it is just use different words. You're smart people. Get a thesaurus. Brandon says I screwed this up too. Yeah, you only knew because I DM'd on Foundry and actually mark out these actions on the character sheet. There you go. And my Eidolons get the monster ability. So there is just, and I've seen a couple other instances of this in the game where they have very similar or even the exact same language. And I think like the most egregious, I want to say, I don't even know how to spell gelatinous. Gelatinous. I think the most egregious is the gelatinous cube, because the gelatinous cube is my favorite. It has in the middle of its stat block, and this is true, by the way, whether you look it up on in your bestiary or you look it up. I'm pretty sure if you look it up on, I can't believe I got it right. Okay, on Archives of Nethys, you're like, okay, yep, okay, I got it. All right, yep. And then it says this. It says engulf, and then it just says rupture 7. And there's nothing in here that tells you anything about rupture 7. Right? You have to go and look this up in the back of the book. And you might go look up rupture because you think to yourself, what the hell does rupture mean? So you go to the back of the book, you look in the index of the bestiary, you look up maybe the monster special ability rules, you look for rupture, and you will not find it. It's because rupture is a subsection within the engulf section. This is all time at our table. Just put it with the damn monster stat block. I don't even know what rupture means. All right, we stumped Daco Popper. And Jason got it exactly right. And we've seen this many times where different people worked on different parts of the game at the same time, and you get this sort of parallel parallel evolution, and people end up with similar names, and then it just makes it through, and they all know what's going on, but we have no idea. So specifically, rupture means if you deal that many points of damage with, I think, a slashing or piercing attack, then you are no longer engulfed by the creature. Yeah, you have to do at least that much damage. Now, look, we are all hyper nerds, okay? We're sitting here on a Thursday night watching a stream about level 2 primal spells. So I get it. We get it. Or at least most of us get it. But do you think all those hundreds or thousands of people who might be picking up Pathfinder 2nd Edition for the first time after being told by Twitter and told by people like me and told by people like Rules Lawyer that Pathfinder 2 is, the bomb? Do you think that they're going to come to this game and they're going to know anything that's going on here? There are a lot of people who play this game, and even I will admit that some of these rules are far too technical, and they are far too nitpicky, and they are far too just in the weeds on this. This gelatinous cube is already a fairly complex monster that's going to be doing a lot of different things that, quite frankly, is very different from your typical monster. The last thing that I need to be doing is flipping back and forth to the back of the Bestiary Special Universal Monster Rules, looking up Engulf, so that I can read this paragraph. By the way, you're like, okay, I'm reading it. Okay, it moves double its speed, and then it reflex save, and okay. All right, I don't get anything like this. Okay, I guess there's nothing. Wait. No, wait. Okay, at the bottom of the second paragraph, if it takes slashing or piercing damage equal or exceeding the listed rupture value for a single attack or spell, the engulfed creature cuts its spell free. We're reading this in combat? No. It is a problem that is somewhat systemic. It's not universal, but it is somewhat systemic. So, anyways, that was my first rant. All right, moving on. How's everybody doing? Any of these things that people are saying are true. Any of these things that people are saying. How hard is it to put a monster sentence on it? It's not hard. Okay, they should call it escape damage. Yeah, that would make sense. Instead, they got to be all cutesy. It's rupture. Ah. And that's the key, Brant. That's the key. They're not common. You know what? That's fine. Jason, give me 5 less horrible, useless monsters, and then give me a monster on a page that I can use, and I don't have to flip to a different part of the book or reference a different monster to look up an ability on this monster. No. If I have my book open, look, even on Archives of Nethys, it doesn't really work. Because watch this. What was that? I don't even remember the name of the monster now. The monster was, I think it was a zombie. Okay? Yeah, I think it was a plague zombie. Watch, you pull up your Archives of Nethys because you're so clever and you want to use a hyperlinked text document and you don't want to use your core rulebook because core rulebooks are for dweebs. So you bring up the plague zombie and you go damage 1d8 plus 4 bludgeoning plus grab. Not a link. It's not a link. It doesn't even take you to the ability on any Archives of Nethys page. It just goes, and you're like, okay, and zombie rot. Well, zombie rot is right here. So I guess they assume that grab is so common that everybody knows, okay, I guess it just means they're grabbed. And that is what my good friend, Aaron Smith, William Brandis in the chat, did. A GM with over 20 plus years of experience. He read this monster description and thought, okay, it grabs. So just put a page. You know what? Rules Lawyer is smarter than all of us. Yeah. Okay, fine. Don't reprint the whole thing. Put a page reference in there. See page 298. That's it. That's all you got to do. Maybe it's an Archive Nethys problem. I don't know. You know what? It's not referenced in the Bestiary, so they probably don't figure that they need to reference it in the game. I can look up what the attack
trait means. I can look up what the disease trait for an attack means. Like, there are multiple zombies in the game. They all have zombie rot. Why isn't zombie rot in the universal creature battle rules? And I have to look it up each time. By the way, you're like, oh, okay. You know, it's just too much. Well, Brant, this is why we were in real trouble, because Obvious from the Discord was in real trouble because the monsters came up and they were able to grab and rip people apart, and they started using their jaws attack right away the second round, because they were able to get those grabs off on the first round, and it was like I don't think they could do that. And then I had to explain the ruling, and they were like, what? That's so weird. And I was like, yeah, that is how it is. And I know it is not written like that at all, but that is how we do it. And it's awkward, to say the least. All right. And see, William, you should have used Paizo's razor and said to yourself, wow, these zombies are coming forward and they're doing all these things and they're going to actually get to do their cool thing. But I am playing a game by Paizo, and I'm sure I could not have done that. All right, well, all praise Foundry. We already knew that the Foundry was amazing and incredible and awesome. So at least Foundry has done it right. At least Foundry has done it wrong. Yes, that is true, David. They also do tell you that subtracting is hard for some people, so you can give me that, but I'll be damned if you tell me what Engulf does. Okay, let's knock out these last couple of spells. And then we'll get really quick into a next rant. It's not that big of a rant. It's a well-known problem. I just want to talk about it. Quench. All right, well, this is a very specific spell. So Rules Lawyer says, my impression is that every sentence is needed. I remember Swallowhole's detailed write-up helping one session may be presented. Better. It went off the screen. Maybe present it better. I don't know. I agree. It's not a quick fix solution. I think you could try to maybe make your abilities simpler, and then you can put them all into one monster stat block. But I can tell you that, there's a tip video for you. Listen, I knew what it did. I am going to make an assumption that not everybody, I have a YouTube channel. I play several Pathfinder 2 games a week. Like, I'm assuming that people, you're called the Rules Lawyer, for God's sake. You run a channel that is dedicated to the study of these rules. In fact, the name of your channel alone predicates that these rules are so complicated that they require a channel dedicated to them. So that might be more appropriate, to be honest with you. Okay, moving on. Quench. So we got ourselves a very specific spell here at 120 feet with a 20-foot burst. So that seems good on paper, with a sustained duration, and the air becomes very saturated with water vapor. Non-magical fires within the area are automatically extinguished. So you remember that stupid rain cloud spell that was really, really ineffective and really, really slow and really dirtily? I think it was called Personal Rain Cloud from level 1. This spell does what you want it to do. Okay? It also does damage to fire creatures, actually doing a good chunk of damage for D8 damage, 20-foot burst, 120-foot range. Now, again, remember, I understand this spell is very, very, very specific, but at least it does what it does. And you can choose a magical fire, a fire spell, or a fire item, and you get a chance to try to counteract it as if you were using Dispel Magic. And it loses its properties for 10 minutes, just like it would with Dispel Magic. And when you sustain this spell, you can move the area of vapor. So this spell is the perfect spell for dealing with fire-type creatures, fire-type effects, dealing with fire of any types. It counteracts, it extinguishes, it can move around, it can cancel a spell, it could cancel an item, it could cancel a magical effect, and very cool and very powerful, but very situational.
So I like it as a scroll. Now, obviously, if I know I'm going to fight the red dragon and his army of fire elementals, I am going to take this spell. One of the big advantages of being a prepared caster. Stress this enough. If you look at how spells work and how the classes work, Paizo considers that the prepared caster is a stronger version of the caster than the spontaneous caster, which is why they give the spontaneous casters some extra perks. The reason they assume that is because they assume that in your game, you are using the advantages of the prepared caster to create the ideal perfect spell loadout, or at least as good as you can get, for each of your adventures. And so I advise players and I advise GMs to make sure that they are allowing their players to do research and gain information and not go into these situations blind. Part of the fun of being a prepared spellcaster is doing your research beforehand and coming in with a sweet, badass loadout that is going to let you really, kick ass and take names. So I am going to hesitantly put this into the scroll case because I really don't feel like you would really need even a scroll of it. I feel like it's something that you would take some of the time, but the reality is it's probably like a D tier spell because of how specific it is. But in the situation where it works and it does what it does, it's pretty reasonable. It's pretty good. And I'm going to put it as a C tier scroll spell. All right. Reaper's Lantern. I don't know this one. All right. Another very primal spell as it uses death and necromancy. All right, that one had me laughing. Rule 0, more like Rule Paizo. Am I right? You are right. You call forth a ghostly lantern that guides the living toward death and the undeath towards true death. Why is this divine? Why is this primal? Why is this not just occult and divine? This doesn't even make sense to me. Okay, so it sheds some light. The lantern is unsubstantial. Who cares about this? Living creatures and undead in the area when you cast a spell or that attempt to enter must make fortitude saves. Living creatures that fail their fortitude saves gain only half the benefit from healing. Wow. A lot of text for something that doesn't really do a whole lot here. So you cast this spell and anyone within the area... only if you in the area when you cast it or enter the area later, make fortitude saves. Living creatures only gain half the benefit from healing spells. Undead targets become enfeebled 1. And then once per turn, you can push the emanation out 5 feet because like Bless, it starts at only 5 feet. So this is like one of the worst spells I've ever seen in my entire life. This might be worse than Pack Attack. It's a cult? Sure. It's divine? Sure. Yeah, this spell is horrible. This spell is so bad. Just cast Turn Undead. All right. That spell, I don't even know what the point of that spell is. Yeah, this spell is strictly worse than Bane Floyd, and Bane's a level lower. Okay. We're going to turn the music off real quick because I do want to talk about these two spells. And I want to talk about a fundamental philosophical issue that exists within Pathfinder 2. And we're going to cover both these spells at the same time. It is Remove Fear and is Remove Paralysis. And theoretically, we could also even add Restore Senses to this. This is a line of spells which has existed within the lineup of your divine casters, your clerics, your druids, forever. And that is the ability to free a creature from these sort of harmful magical effects, right? You can see here, it's everything but arcane. They've even extended it to occult, and that makes sense. Now, here's the deal. You are talking about a character using a spell that they have chosen, that they have taken, that they have prepared, using their actions and their turns to try to cancel the effect of one of these very limited and narrow effects. So if I take Remove Fear, this spell does nothing unless we encounter something that is going to frighten us. And that on paper, that is very good. A great example of this in a card game like Magic the Gathering is a spell like Counterspell, which costs 2 blue mana
and it says counter target spell, meaning they play a spell. I don't want that spell to resolve. I play my counter spell and it counters the spell. No questions asked, just works. They're down a spell and some mana. I'm down a spell and some mana. Someone frightened an enemy. Maybe they used a demoralize action. They'll use one action, or maybe they cast a fear spell and they use 2 actions. I use 2 actions and I use my very limited spell to remove it. Except in Pathfinder 2, because they wanted to use their cool, neat, nifty counteract mechanic, spells like remove fear and spells like remove paralysis instead use the counteract rules. And what this means is there is a very reasonable chance that you are going to try to remove this fear or paralysis effect and fail. And quite frankly, it's a problem that is exacerbated because if the creature is lower level than you and the effect is lower level than you, then yes, the counter effect is going to be very easy. In fact, even if you fail the counteract check, but again, the DC will be lower. So if the effect, the level of the power of the monster that is paralyzing you or frightening you is lower level, or if the spell that is doing the paralyzing or the frightening is lower level, you will be, the DC is already lower. And then if you fail that check, so you're already advantaged, but then if you fail the check, if your remove paralysis is higher level, it's still gonna fail, or it's still gonna succeed. But the DC was lower, so more than likely your fellow party members, including yourself, probably would have passed that save. Where this is really going to come up is against a higher level creature, okay? We encounter a dragon, and they are very powerful, and they come in and they hit my buddy with a frightened 3. I want to cast remove fear. The dragon is higher level than me. Now, I have to crit with my remove fear spell, which is not a buff. It's not a debuff. I'm just taking away a debuff. I have to crit with my remove fear spell just to deal with it. This is a spell that only does this one exact thing. And I have to crit to get it to work. Or I have to, if it's really close, I at least have to pass the counteract check. But the monster's higher level than me. So the DC is going to be high. So I'm also very likely to fail. It's strange. Like, this is the same mechanic we saw with Dispel Magic. I was okay with it with Dispel Magic. Dispel Magic is S tier. Because it's Dispel Magic. They cast fear on me. I'll dispel it. Make a counteract check. That's fine. Dispel Magic could work on a wall of fire. Dispel Magic could work on an obscuring mist spell. Dispel Magic could work on a fear spell. Dispel Magic could work on a paralyzed spell. This spell only does one thing. It removes fear. To say nothing of the fact that Dispel Magic is ranged, and remove fear and remove paralysis, I believe, and remove fear is definitely touch. Remove paralysis is also touch. So more than likely, unless you're literally next to the person, you are going to move 1 foot. Now, also, you can't scroll these. You can't scroll them. Why? Because, forget the heighten. Forget the heighten. This is a counteract check. This means that if I took this as a scroll and it was only a level 2 scroll, when I'm, let's say, level 6 or 7 and I'm fighting level 4 monsters and we get hit with a level 4 paralysis effect, guess what? This scroll doesn't work on that unless I roll a critical, because it's the counteract check tied to the level of the spell at it was cast. So, what the hell? Why doesn't remove fear say it's AoE or multiple target from right away, and it just reduces everyone's frightened condition by 1? That's all it had to say. That's all it had to say. Robert got it right. Right, exactly, Robert. You have to keep upgrading that scroll as you go up in level, which kind of defeats the purpose of having the scroll. If you have to keep upgrading it, you're better just taking it. And so now I am forced to taking as one of my highest level spell slots, something to deal with one specific condition. And even then,
there's a good chance that I'm going to fail when I do go to cast it. These spells are horribly designed. I get that they liked the counteract mechanic. I get that they were worried that, the big, bad, evil monster was going to cast fear, I guess, and then some cheeky cleric was going to come in and cast remove fear and just undo what the cleric did, or what the evil bad guy did, I guess. Instead, they had to make it so that the cleric casts remove fear and has a snowball's chance in hell of it actually even doing anything. And even if it succeeded, you're not any better. You're just on par. It is so fundamentally flawed, especially when Dispel Magic exists. And it's just very, very, very disappointing and bad, because in a game where debuffs are so powerful and effective, to have a cleric or a druid take their spells, and instead of taking these cool fireballs or these very effective spells like heal, which is always going to heal, instead you get this spell that you have to counteract, and if you fail, it just does nothing. And the spells that you want to counteract are exactly the ones that you're most likely to fail against. These spells are very disappointing to me. They're not F tier because I guess they do what they do, but they are D. And it's a fundamental problem with this entire line. There's a remove poison, or I think it's called neutralize poison. There's a remove disease spell at higher levels. These all work the same way, and they all fail in what they are trying to do for the exact same reason. And as painful as these conditions are in the game, magic should be able to be a cool way for your party members to work together to deal with them. Oh, I got frightened 3 fleeing, and the cleric comes in and says, I got remove fear, and then I'm not frightened 3 fleeing. Maybe I'm just frightened 1 not fleeing. But instead, the cleric's going to come over, spend their whole turn, because it's touch. They're probably going to have to move over to me, spend 2 actions, and then they have to roll like a crit. Or at the very least, they have to roll a success. It's, you know why Ruinsmith? It's because Quench works. This spell doesn't work. This spell does not function in the Pathfinder 2 mechanic. And yes, fear automatically corrects itself after a period of time anyways. Yes, of course, there are fears and paralysis. I'm not trying to say that Dispel Magic here is the problem. I'm trying to say that these spells are the problem. They don't work. I mean, I promise you, take them in your games, see how they work out, and they both have the problem of counteract checks. That's exactly correct. The problem is the counteract check for a removal of something that is specific. This is a silver bullet that it only hurts werewolves, but whenever you use it, there's an 80% chance that the bullet misfires. And you just go, okay, don't take this. It's too unpredictable, and we're not going to get the effect out of it that we want. So, Anthony, look, honestly, why get that particular? What is the issue? What is the problem with someone dealing with this? Oh, you're saying that Quench has that on your comment. Okay. Okay, fair enough. Quench is a AoE duration, 120-foot range, and it also automatically puts out all range fires. Like, if remove paralysis, or like if remove paralysis said something like the target makes a new save, and if they succeed, they're no longer paralyzed, but if they fail, they're stunned 1 or 2 instead. And so it's like, okay, cast remove paralysis. They get another chance at a save. Maybe they break out of it. Awesome. But they could still fail. And then the paralysis is completely shaken off, but they're still stunned 1 or stunned 2 for the next round because, they're kind of still fighting the effects of the paralysis. That would be a cool spell. I'd be down with that. But that's not what it is. It's just doing all this. Ian Ryder, that's an even better question. I don't know why these are all separate, because you're like, hey guys, I took remove fear today. We're going to be in luck. And then like a bunch of creatures that affect you with, ghouls. And you're like, oh, well, plus paralysis,
has incapacitation anyways. So the only things that can't actually paralyze you with any degree of regularity are things that are higher level than you, which by definition means that the counteract checks, in order to affect them, are going to require, more than likely, a critical hit on your counteract check. So what does this spell do? Nothing. Jason, I think there's a lot of ways that you could design this spell differently. That would be one of them. But clearly they wanted to use this universal rule. Anthony, there is a restoration spell. And we're going to get to it next. I'm going to skip ahead real quick, though, to restore senses. This does the same thing as remove fear or removed paralysis, but it only works for the blinded and deafened condition. And again, requiring a counteract check. So blindness has the incapacitation trait. So the high level boss comes in and they cast blindness on your fighter, and your fighter fails to save because it's incapacitation. So the boss is casting a higher level spell than you are, and you go, don't worry, I took this extremely niche spell it only works to recover blinded and deafened condition. And you're like, I'm going to cast Restore Senses on you. This feels perfect. I feel like a badass. I prepared the one spell that is great for when we get blinded. And I go, okay, great. Well, the boss is casting a spell that's 2 levels higher than you, so you need to make a critical check on your spell magic against his DC. So you're going to need to roll a 20. And you go, why did I take this spell? Isn't this the exact reason I took this spell? And you're like, yes, it is exact reason that you took the spell. You're fighting a big fight, and it's an important fight against a tough opponent who's blinded your fighter, and you took Restore Senses, and I'm telling you that 95% of the time it is going to do nothing. So D's all around. Probably should be F's. But a remove condition spell would be far more versatile, like a limited form of dispel magic. But even then, it's like, well, can't you give me some sort of benefit or something? Because at least dispel magic could theoretically dispel anything. It could dispel a wall of fire. It could dispel a magical effect. This only helps me for this. So Matthew's saying F. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm hesitant to put. Here's why they're not F. Because in theory, this should be very powerful. Being blinded sucks. I'm getting F's, a lot of F's in the chat. F's in the chat. F's in the chat. Okay. F's in the chat. F's in the chat. Okay. Oh, absolute number one. 90% of the time when you get these things, they're going to be from magical effects anyways. And so dispel magic is just better. But like dispel magic is so versatile. These spells do one thing and they don't do it well. Which brings us to restoration. Now, Matthew, you are quite correct. In my game, these spells are sweet, but only if you dig deep and you have the support of the community behind you and all of Varesia cheering you on, and you have the heroic resolve to make sure that you can pull it out against those tough foes. But most people don't. And so, yeah. I don't understand this reference, but yeah. Yes. The counteract spells at least span the whole tier list. Now, that is true. All right, so here's restoration. Now, this is not a combat spell. This is an out of combat spell because it takes 1 minute and it's touch. This spell is cool because restorative magic does its things. They can either reduce a condition or lessen a toxin. Now, they can only benefit from one restoration spell each day, and it can't benefit from restoration more than once to reduce the stage of the same exposure to a given toxin. But when you do it, it just works. Hey, after that fight, I've gotten some sort of weird curse or condition or issue, and I am clumsy 2. Cool. Womp. You are now clumsy 0. Or I am enfeebled 1 and stupefied 1. Cool. I can reduce each of those by 1. And then as you take it at higher levels, it adds more abilities. And adds more abilities, and it adds a third option, and you can reduce doom, and then you get to 6th level, and you can even reduce permanent doom condition. Oh, that's pretty sweet. And it just works. It restores you. I cast the spell, and you're better. This spell is sweet. So this spell is cool. And there's a lot of things that stick around that are just nice and easy to deal with, and you just cast the spell and they're good. Now, granted, you can't cast affect this target more than once per day, which you can also do with Battlefield Medicine, but at least you cannot also do that with Battlefield Medicine, but at least the spell is magical, so it makes somewhat of sense. Now, it doesn't do this for Fear, because Frighten goes away by the end of the fight. It doesn't do this for Sicken, because the assumption is you can just retch it out eventually. But for most of these conditions that are going to stick around for a while, Clumsy, Enfeebled, and Stupefied, the only one that's not hitting there is Drained, and you pick that one up at... do you get that at 4th? No, you do never get Drained. Maybe, I think there's a higher level. So this spell is very good. And this spell is a great way to bypass all the bullshit, no counteract checks, and just works. Is this spell S tier? The fact that it's a minute duration makes me want to put it in the A tier. But I will tell you that these conditions, if also, I agree, Anthony. I mean, technically you need to retch out the Sicken, but if someone casts Restoration and they had any lingering Sickens or Frightens, I would just assume that this would also we could just role play and say that it takes care of it. But fundamentally it doesn't, but the idea is that you think. Floyd, I think you're right. I mean, Ruinsmith says it's B, but I think Floyd's probably right, closer to the fact that it's A-. But I can tell you that these status effects do add up, and they can really start to drain on a character's abilities, especially if you, like me, and you use statuses as a way to sort of penalize or, kind of inflict problems on your PCs. Maybe you're doing some sort of a scene where the party is going through a mountain pass and someone critically fails their check, and you say, oh, you tumble down the pass and you sprain your ankle, you're clumsy too. And you're like, oh, how? Well, every day that you rest will reduce the clumsy condition by 1. And it's like, oh, that's clumsy too. That's -2 to reflex saves, -2 to armor class. And then in comes your cleric or druid with the primal spell list or the divine spell list. They cast restoration and you're all better. These conditions are real. The penalties they produce are real. And this spell just delivers. It just works. So it's really good. All right. We only got a couple more to go. Okay. So that was my second rant. Yeah, total entropy, I completely agree with you. Solid A, this spell does a lot, and all those conditions come up a lot more often than you think, and I agree. And it heightens so that you can even deal with some of those really pesky conditions like Doom. And if you've been watching our Rise of the Rune Lord APs, Tuesdays, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you know that Doomed is a condition that the party is having to contend with pretty heavily right now. We've got a character at Doomed 3. That's nasty. They go unconscious, they're dead. Shapewood. Well, this spell is primal only, but look at this. It's very short. Touch, unworked piece of wood, 20 feet in volume. You shape it into a rough object of your choice. You cannot make fine details or moving pieces, and you can't add value. I mean, this spell just seems to work. It's not particularly combat effective, but that's okay. I think you could have a lot of fun with this spell. Now, 20 cubic feet in volume, that's not a ton. That is like smaller than 3 foot by 3 foot by 3 foot. So it's like roughly 3 feet by 3 feet by 2 feet. Yeah, it's not a huge area. It's probably an area roughly about the size of, like if you were to draw a cylinder around like, maybe a person with a little bit of space around them. But I think it's enough for you to do some fun stuff. I don't think you'd ever take the spell. I think you would put it in a scroll if you were to do it at all. And I think you would probably say that this is probably a D tier. Okay, C tier. C or D? I see one in the chat for C. C. Okay. D. All right. We got 2 C's. We got 1 D. Here we go. Oh, you know what? I forgot I had this. All right. Polls up. The poll is live. And we're right on the fence between the two. All right, get your votes in. Well, I kind of go to the next one here. So Shapewood is pending. It's going to be C or D. And we're going to move on to Shatter. Now, Gabriel, I do agree with what you're saying. They're like some of the illusion spells. I like that this spell is very free form. I mean, it says that you can't make mechanical pieces. You can't make complex things with it. But there's a lot you could do with this. I could turn a tree into a canoe, a crude canoe. I could turn a tree into a battering ram. I could turn a wooden palisade into an archway. I could turn a bunch of tree branch into a primitive bridge or something like that. There's a lot of cool, creative, fun stuff that you could do with that spell. Okay, that's one of the reasons why I thought it was like a C tier spell. I kind of liked it. Just saying. All right, let's see what the chat said. All right, final results of the chat poll. We are going with, it looks like, C tier. All right, with 68% of the vote, it is a solid C. All right, great. Thank you, chat. I needed you on that one. All right, so Shatter in 5th edition is a badass AoE spell. In this game, it only targets objects that are unattended. And it does 2d10 sonic damage, and it ignores the hardness if it's 4 or lower. But if it's 5 or higher, it subtracts the full amount of hardness, and it has to be unattended. So you're not going to be using this against someone's shield or their armor or their sword. This is only against unattended objects, and it gets through some of the hardness, but once it reaches a certain level, you get the full value of the hardness gets applied. Not a big fan of this spell at all. It does not affect constructs. It does not affect creatures. It doesn't even affect objects that are being held or otherwise attended. Why can't it just ignore hardness? Why? I don't know, David. This is the same thing. This spell does one thing, and it doesn't even do it that good. Also, as for the exploding door, just cast knock. It'll probably work better. Some things in Pathfinder 2 have a lot of hit points. Like a lot of hit points. That 2d10 sonic damage isn't getting through your standard door. At least I'm pretty sure it's not. Let's take a look. Here we go. Material statistics. All right, we've got ourselves a simple door. Guess what? A simple door. A simple door. I can't even make this up. Hold on a sec. I got to show you guys. A simple door. Wood. As in chest. Simple door. Table. Has hardness 5. Hit points 20. So Shatter doesn't even work against baseline. You can start heightening it up to the levels of Fireball and Cone of Cold and stuff. But it doesn't even break a chest or a simple door. It would work against
an unattended suit of leather armor. So, correct, Anthony. Good for exploding doors? No. Shatter doesn't even ignore the hardness of a simple wooden door. And you would need max damage. And if you did max damage, it would still be up. Brant, that's pretty good. All right, so that spells F, right? We can all agree on that. Doesn't even work. Okay. Again, you're like, haha, I took Shatter. We'll be able to clear this rubble in no time. And like the TM's like, all right, well, the hardness of this stone is 10. So unless your Shatter is as powerful as a Raise Dead spell, you're not doing anything to it. Also, it has like 60 hit points. So I hope you took like 4 of those. I know. You know, I'm gonna Anthony, message me on the Discord about I need to put in a video of the Don being like, oh, look how they massacred my boy. All right. Shatter in 5th edition is sweet. All right. Good old speak with animals. That is true, Jason. An object becomes broken if it is at half damage. That is true. Although, what does that mean for a door versus being destroyed? Can I go through a broken door? So what's the difference between a broken door and a destroyed door? Well, my guess is Speak with Animals is going to do what it says on the tin. Yep, I cast 2 actions, and it gets 10 minutes, and I can ask questions of and receive answers from, and I can use the diplomacy skill with animals. Does not make them more friendly, though. Yeah. I mean, I guess this does what it does. I don't think you take the spell on the regular. It's probably a C tier scroll. Does what it does. If you need to go Dr. Doolittle, yeah, I mean, obviously, animal empathy does this anyways. Jason says S wand. You need to listen, unless you're having a lot of conversations with your animals every day, don't think you need that one on a wand. So it's pretty much a solid C. It is playable, but you're not excited to take it, you know? It's playable for those situations, but you're not excited to take it. Okay, status, which I call the make all of our cheating legal spell. It's always been this way. You will remain aware of the present state. You know the target's direction from you, distance from you, and any conditions affecting you. AKA, we're playing at a table, and you're far away, and I don't have the status spell cast on you. And so I'm like, hey, man, how are you doing? You're like, oh, man, I'm down to 10 hit points, and I could really use some help. Now, how does my character know this? That we don't, but we're all sitting around the gaming table, and everyone tells each other. Everyone's like, you can't know his hit points or his condition. You don't have the status spell cast on them. Okay. Also, it's one creature. I'm not going to cast this. So unless it's 4th level, because then at least I could target my whole party. And even then, I'm not using a 4th level spell slot on this. So I'm never going to cast this spell ever. Mostly because at every table I've ever been at ever in close to 30 years of playing Dungeons and Dragons, no DM has ever not been allowed us to basically kind of like talk to each other. Almost as if we were telepathic. You can't speak to each other. It's in combat. You don't have that kind of time to plan. I need your action now in 5 seconds, and no one can talk. It's like, if someone does that to you, just leave the table. You don't even explain anything. Leave your dice too. Pick up your phone, leave your pencil, your dice, your mini. It's worth it. You'll buy new ones. They're tainted. Get up. Don't even say anything. Just get up and walk to the door. They're going to sit there for 10 minutes being like, did he just go to the bathroom? Like, where did he even go? And then it's like, if you're lucky, maybe you'll just ruin their whole session. And that's it. Lance Quagmire says noted. Yes. Like, that's horrible. All right, I take it back. I only ever have cheap plastic Chessex dice that are highly visible, highly readable, highly contrast. If you have super awesome wormwood or metal dice, maybe you could take them with them. But I would highly recommend soaking them in maybe a high-proof whiskey or bourbon to burn that taint off. Don't split the party unless you're willing to waste a spell slot. Now, listen, if it's clearly a situation where it's like they're captured, okay, that's fine. But if we're in a combat situation and they're in the room behind me and the GM's like, you don't know how they're like, you can't talk to them. Don't talk to him. That's horrible. Don't play like that. Life is too short. Life is way too short to play horrible Pathfinder with horrible people. I'm going to say it's GMD. All right. I was surprised by this spell. Sudden Blight. I was expecting this spell to be horrible. Check this out. It is a 102 action, 120 foot. Okay, we're going to D. Jason says smart things, so I'm going to agree with Jason. Jason Cox, by the way, not the other Jason. This is a 120 foot, 20 foot burst fortitude save. So it's an AoE fort save that does 2d10 negative damage. And in addition, you don't have to, make all tiny and small plants in the area, rot them, resulting in any difficult terrain, cover, and concealment. And it also attempts to counter effect any magical in the plants before withering them. So it's an AoE dispel that does damage. Well, let me put it this way. It's any living creature takes 2d10 damage. So at rate, it's 120 foot, 20 foot burst, AoE 20 foot burst AoE damage spell. Now, granted, it's 2d10 damage. It's not a lot, but consider that Burning Hands is 4d6. That's 14. And a 15 foot cone. This is 2d10, which is an average of 11. 3 less damage at 120 feet at 20 foot burst. But we are missing the most important thing about this spell. Sure, it does some damage, but also it causes small and tiny non-creature plants in the area to rot, and it can counteract any magical effects on plants. That means, especially this last part, could potentially be very effective against leshies. And I think that's very important. So this spell is huge, big damage, fireball size, sound burst ++. This spell kind of kicks ass. For a level 2 spell, and it scales 1d10 per +1. But don't forget the most important thing. If before you were 120 feet away and you threw this massive 20-foot burst, you somehow got in there and diseased them, they get a penalty. So 3x the range, 2x the area of sound burst, and it only targets living creatures. So you can't use it against undead or constructs. So, but I think this spell's an A. I'm pretty impressed. Also, good point. It pretty much cancels Entangle. But also too, like if you were being ambushed and there was a bunch of people and they had cover and concealment from the plants in the area, this spell not only would deal damage to all your ambushers, it would also rot and blight away all of their ambush cover. I think it's pretty good. I mean, I know it doesn't affect leshies, but in my heart, it would. All right, we got 3 spells left. We got Thundering Dominance. This spell sounds too cool for it to be any good. It is your companion or your Eidolon. So this is that special category of only affecting your Eidolon or your companion. You give them a +1 status bonus to their intimidation checks. And once during the entire duration, they can use Thundering Roar, which for 1 action, every enemy within 10 feet of them and 10-foot emanation takes 4d10 sonic damage with a basic will save. Now, see, by the way, this is what we were talking about earlier. What does basic save mean? It means they take 0, half, full, or double on a critical success, a failure, and a critical failure. This says each enemy in a 10-foot emanation takes 4d10 sonic damage with a basic underscored will save against your spell DC. Cool. That is correct. A creature that fails its will save is also frightened 1. This is no longer a basic will save. It's kind of cool, though. Granted, remember, your Eidolon uses your actions and your companion uses your actions. So even though it's 2 actions, you're really spending 3 actions to do this.
And the range is 30 feet, and it's pretty good, though. I mean, it's not critical fail, frighten 1. It's just fail, frighten 1. So AoE, fear 1, 4d8 sonic damage. I mean, I think that's pretty good. So I'm going to give this spell, I'm going to give it that special companion color that we had given it before, that sort of ugly lime green. And I'm going to say that this spell, I mean, if I had a companion and I was casting this spell, I'd probably be pretty happy with it. And heighten's pretty cool too here. Look at this. It goes up only by 2, but it does go up by 2d8 for 2. And also it gives you increasing bonus to intimidation check. So it can give you, Daco Popper got it right. It can give you a big bonus to that intimidation check. I like it at B as well. Again, under the confines and the context that this spell is really only good if you have a companion or an Eidolon. So all summoner only spells are auto F. To be fair, it says or companion. Your druid could have the companion. All right. It's an animal companion. Matt could cast this. Burl could cast this on Lucky. He has an animal companion from his Beastmaster. Even though he's an elemental fire sorcerer, he gets the primal list. He could take this spell. He could cast it on Lucky. Be pretty sweet. All right, we got 2 left. Tree shape turns you into a tree. It's a polymorph. Make sure you remember that. 8 hours, you turn into a large tree, and perception checks do not reveal your true nature. But a successful nature or survival check appears that you are a strange new tree to the area. I want to just say that if you made me into a tree for 8 hours, I think I would be like really claustrophobic, and that would really freak me out. But you can't really do anything, and you're a tree. Listen, Anthony, leshies are dumb. Trees are cool. I have no idea how to rate this spell at all. Like, at all. Like, at all. So, like, at all. No clue. For when the druid player has to miss a session. I don't think this is an espionage spell, Anthony. Evening, Griffon. Good to see you. Hi. Glad you're here. See you're doing well. Is this an espionage or stealth spell? I don't know. I mean, it's cool. It's a druid. It does something. It does a thing. All right. All right. I'm going to say scroll, see, it does a thing. All right. That's true. Not very useful if you're not in a forest. I'm going to take it down to D. Oh, Griffith says B, coming in hot. I gotta agree with Jason here. I mean, it's S in the forest. It's D. All right, fine. S in the forest, D otherwise. So we'll bring it back up to C. Oh, Robert says it's a D scroll. We're very contentious about this. Yeah, honestly, my gut instinct tells me that this isn't really going to do a whole lot most of the time. It's fun. I don't even think Ruin. I don't even think this is a GM spell. Oh, total entropy. You can totally turn into a tree in the dungeon if the room is big enough, I'm assuming. Now, granted, everyone will be able to tell what you are, and your AC is 20. I mean, your hit points don't change. It's just a big tree sitting in there. All right, we got our last spell, and wouldn't be Pathfinder without some sort of weird worms gnawing at you. This one coming to us from the Abomination Vaults adventure path. Probably coming from Volek, if you've played that adventure. We got a 30-foot range spell that targets a corporeal creature, which causes worms to appear within their flesh. And again, we're like, oh, wow, look at this. It deals 4d6 piercing damage and 1d6 persistent piercing damage. We're like, that's cool. And if it's a non-skeletal, corporeal, undead creature, because that comes up a lot, that basically means zombies or zombie-like creatures, then they take an extra 2d6 damage. Wow, lots of things with this. It's rare because it's, again, the rarities don't really matter. They don't actually matter in terms of balance or power. Then we're like, they make a fort save. Okay, Crit, nothing. Success, they take the full damage, but no persistent damage. So on a success, they take 4d6 piercing damage. On a failure, it takes 4d6 piercing damage, 1d6 persistent piercing damage, and is flat-footed due to pain as long as they take persistent damage. By the way, this is an occult spell, so yes, the bard is going to be summoning gnawing worms within your flesh that will continue to rip you apart while you take flat-footed penalties from the persistent and never-ending pain. If you crit fail, you take double the initial damage. So that would be 8d6 piercing damage, 1d6 ongoing persistent piercing damage, and you are also flat-footed and you are also slowed 1 for the incredible pain. That's flat-footed and slowed 1. Well, this spell is obviously insane, right? I mean, there's no way around that. If someone crit fails this, they are just completely boned. They are slowed 1, flat-footed. It's not even duration is persistent. So, yeah, there's a 25% chance it's going to end right round. This is actually a really good spell. Anthony, you were correct. There is way too much spell going on. Why we didn't need, again, it's fun for flavor. I get why they put stuff like this in here, but we really did not need this sentence that if the target is a non-skeletal, but it's corporeal, but it's undead, then it does an extra 2d6 persistent damage. Well, Damian Williams, a couple things. Number one, technically you need the GM permission to take anything, including uncommon spells, but, rare spells aren't necessarily better or more powerful than other things. So Ruinsmith got the right of it. So, yes, Damian, it can be an S. Now, the fact that it's rare may mean that your GM doesn't allow you to take it, but Horizon Thundersphere is an S. It's common, and people allow their players to take this. I sing the song about worms gnawing at your flesh. It's a very popular one from the East, where I come from. Slashing damage, plus persistent damage, plus flat-footed, plus slowed 1, it's a bit much. Agreed. But that's only if they critically fail. And like all good slowing spells, this spell does not have the incapacitation trait, so we'll be sure to screw over everybody that we cast this on. Well, this spell is great. It does a ton of damage, and most importantly, as Ruinsmith correctly identified, full damage. Anthony, spoiler alert, it did not. This spell, I believe, is possessed and owned by the mage apprentice to Belcora named Volek. And our party mage or wizard beat Volek's initiative and cast slow, and Volek critically failed the slow check, and so was slowed 2. And rather than embarrass the creature further, I removed it from the battlefield because it was no longer capable. It was a mage and no longer capable of casting any spells because it was limited to 1 action per turn. Because if a creature critically fails against slow, it is, for all intents and purposes, dead. So it never came up. Yes, if for people who say, does Pathfinder have instant death spells? You say, yes, it does. It is called slow. Met Volek last Sunday, and he nearly killed us with this spell. Yeah, I'm sure it would have been an awesome fight. But alas, slow 2 does not have the incapacitation trait. I mean, it's getting 1 action per round when you're like a boss monster is pretty brutal for anything. But when you're a spellcaster, meaning you literally can't cast almost any of your spells, I mean, you tip the king at that point, right? Jason, have a great night as well. Guys, we finished with only 1 minute to spare. And so I did promise a third rant, which I'll certainly do before I sign off. Okay.
So my last rant of the evening is weapon damage dice. We had talked for some time about some of the rules that Pathfinder makes, and they very clearly have some abilities, like, for example, Dwarves Ancestral Vengeance, which deals +1 dice or +1 damage per weapon die. And you gain additional weapon die by putting striking runes on your weapons. Striking runes, major striking runes, greater striking runes. So cool. But there are plenty of effects in the game, such as power attack, which quite specifically, which quite specifically, like power attack, which say, using a common language that we can all agree upon, that say, power attack, this spell adds 1 additional weapon die. If you're 10th level, power attack says, this spell adds 2 additional weapon dice of damage. So we are talking about weapon dice of damage. And that is the language that they have used. They could have used any choice of language for spells, for effects like power attack, or for things that add weapon dice of damage. They could have used anything, and they used weapon dice of damage. And so, therefore, one would make the assumption that if something referenced weapon dice of damage, it would be referencing weapons dice of damage. But it turns out, according to how it's played in the official rules, people over at Paizo, something like Dwarves Ancestral Vengeance, which adds +1 point of damage, circumstance bonus damage, per weapon dice, does not, in fact...
Jason B. tipped $10. You think these rules are complicated? You should check out Restraining Orders.
Thank you, Jason B. This isn't even a case... thank you very much for the tip, by the way. This isn't even a case of a thing where power attack sounds like a cool spell. Sorry. Feat. Power attack feat. So if you have a striking rune on your weapon, you now have 2 weapon dice of damage. You deal +2 damage with your Dwarves Ancestral Vengeance. Any reasonable person would look at the game and say, I'm power attacking. This adds 2 weapon dice of damage. I'm spending 2 actions. I'm now going to deal 4 weapon dice of damage, because that is literally what the book says. And then here is a feat that says you add +1 point of damage per weapon die. I have 4 weapon die. I'm adding 4 points of damage. And Paizo says, no, that is not the case. You only count weapon dice of damage as extra weapon dice of damage if they're from the weapon or from the striking rune. Then why did you use that term? And why are you making your game needlessly complex? Just let weapon dice of damage be weapon dice of damage. Who cares? You're adding an extra 2 points of damage to a character who's critting for 85 with monsters who have 255 hit points. What difference does it make? You are making the game more complicated needlessly. I understand that Pathfinder 2 has its flaws. Don't think that I don't appreciate the game for its benefits, but they are never, ever, ever, ever going to make a dent into the 5e juggernaut with this kind of rules interaction. If you're going to make something like weapon dice of damage be something in your game, and you're going to have things add to it, like striking runes or like power attack, striking runes do it permanently, power attack does it for 1 attack, and then you're going to have other feats and abilities that trigger off of weapon dice of damage, don't split it. Don't split it. Don't make it so that now I have to track whether these are weapon dice of damage from X versus weapon dice of damage from Y. Because now they have the same name, but they act and respond differently. They act and respond differently to spells and effects in the game. And that just isn't fair. It isn't fair to players who are trying to look at the rules and build an interesting character. It isn't fair to people who are trying to make sense out of all these hundreds of pages of rules and try to understand how these things work together. And I've played Magic the Gathering at a competitive level. I own hundreds of board games. And I can tell you that these kind of rules ambiguities are what can kill a game. Okay? It can kill a game. And Pathfinder 2 and by the way, that's not even in core rules is written that you wouldn't even think this is an ambiguity. You would go, oh, wow, that's pretty cool. Yeah, power attack adds extra weapon dice of damage. These things trigger off of extra weapon dice of damage. That's cool. I get an extra little bonus, little perk. They went and made it more complicated by clarifying this position in this video, and it's like they're trying to add complexity. And of course, Paizo's Razor, they are like saying, oh, wouldn't it be cool? Like if you're adding your power attack, you get to add an extra couple points of damage from your vengeful hatred. No, that would be cool. So that is definitely not what you have to do. Instead, you have to track your different weapon price damage separately, sources separately, and make sure that things that react to one don't react to the other. And it's very frustrating to me to be in that situation. And I don't know what to tell you. It's frustrating. That's what I would say. It's frustrating. Okay, well, I am good for another couple minutes. If anybody wants to ask me any questions while I'm here, we are going to be, of course, breaking for the weekend. We got some Pathfinder 2 that I'm going to be playing tomorrow. We'll be back Tuesday for another Knights of the Last Call of Rise of the Runelords AP. But next Thursday, I think we're live as well. But I think the Thursday after that, we are going to be taking a break. So my hope is that next Thursday we'll only have the Occult and the Divine. And last time we knocked those out in one episode. So my hope is to knock out Occult and Divine in one episode next week, and then we'll take a break. So to sum up, should I get pizza again? Yes, tomorrow. Yes. You can get pepperoni. I like pepperoni. It doesn't have to be sausage, although they do have the good sausage. No, but I can get them tomorrow. So yeah, to sum up, I'm enjoying Pathfinder 2. I'm enjoying the Rise of the Runelords AP. I'm enjoying playing in my friend William Brandis' campaign. I'm enjoying leveling up this cleric, and I'm enjoying seeing what the characters can do. But there are these proud nails that stick out all over this game, and they bother me. Is the best condition dead or slowed 2 based on how much it depresses the GM? This is true. You know, death is a release, not a punishment. Slowed 2 is a punishment. You know, it's like a capital punishment question. What's worse, you know, a quick execution or, you know, double life imprisonment? Well, you know, double life imprisonment. Robert, that does stink, man. I'm sorry. One day, Robert, maybe we'll switch it up. I don't know. Or maybe we'll get a second game going. I mean, my hope and my goal is to be able to get enough stuff going on with the Knights that we have stuff coming out all the time. And, you know, like I said, I'd love to get a different game going besides Pathfinder 2. I do love so many of these different games. And once things get settled down, I'm hoping to go into the Discord and, you know, take care, maybe run some community games or run some games for some of the higher tier patrons or something. Just because I love to play and it's fun to be able to express and share that with everybody else. So, yeah. No, why is everybody playing on Tuesdays? No, Anthony, no, that's okay. I mean, listen. If you can't be watching us, and you're gonna if you have to play, that is totally acceptable. Totally acceptable. I don't know how I feel, Griffin, about Starfinder. We've talked about this before. Sci-fi fantasy is a little bit of a weird spot for me. But I mean, again, I need to read it. I think different games could be good for the channel as well. All right. Well, I want to say thanks to everybody who joined us tonight. I want to say thank you to our patrons who have stuck with us. I want to thank you for everyone for sticking with us all day. I want to thank anybody who tipped, anybody who super chatted. Of course, I appreciate the support. You guys have been doing a fantastic job of supporting us in our live streams. We're doing really well. And because of that, we are going to be able to reinvest into our Patreon immensely. We're going to be able to reinvest into our channel. We're going to be bringing you these live streams. We're going to be bringing you additional content. Thanks to the support from the patrons and our live streams, we are going to try to bring back combat and tactics. We're going to bring back Night School. We're going to bring back... goodness gracious me, am I? Oh, I said combat tactics. Okay. So, you know, all these things and more.
Steven tipped $10. Come to the dark side and play more game.
Yeah, listen, once everything is kind of running smoothly, you know, we took a lot of effort to get the live stream up and running. Thank you very, very much, Steven. You're amazing. You're incredible. Thank you. And thank you for helping out Bob the other day. Steven ran a game with Bob, and that was pretty nice. Gwildor, thank you for the stream.
Stormcaller tipped $10. Great stream.
Yes, thank you, Gwildor. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. I don't know if you need a character sheet. Let me know. I know Kaz was joking with you. Gwildor, Stormcaller, Tim Carpenter, everybody from the Knights of Last Call, Wizard Extraordinaire, Rogue Extraordinaire, Druid Extraordinaire, and plays a mean fighter too. He does it all. I want to say thank you to our Patreon supporters, our heroes, and our champions. And this is, if you stuck around, this is a surprise thing.
We technically issued the very first, it's coming in the mail, the very first Knights of Last Call merch. It's a teaser, but we are going to be sending one out to our champions and our heroes for free. We are looking forward to getting those and sending those out as a thank you to our higher tier patrons, who, quite frankly, have really just been supporting us because for the hell of it, we are trying to work up to the value that they so rightfully deserve. And I want to make sure that they get everything that they have been supporting and helping us out for. So, we are going to be doing our first little droplet of merch. There's going to be other ways to win them through our Patreon contest and all that other stuff and everything like that. But Atomic Hobo
tip $10. Woohoo merch.
Yes. And we hope to have more to come and be able to give it away in contests and do contest giveaways on these live streams and send it out afterwards. And I'm really, really looking forward to that. We're also going to be sending out our first prizes from people who have won stuff. We're sending out, a set. We're sending out a book from Legend of the Five Rings 5th edition. We're buying somebody the G.I. Joe role-playing game system, and somebody else got a set of the Pathfinder 2 art spell cards. And, these are prizes that our patrons are winning every month that we're sending out. And they're going to get a bonus merch. So again, we're having fun with it, and we're going to try to make this as fun for our audience as it is for us. And we really say thank you to everybody who's supporting us. So thank you so much, everybody, for supporting us, supporting me, supporting the Knights. Everybody here is an incredible, incredible, wonderful human being. And I want to say thank you very much. So have a great weekend. And, definitely enjoy yourselves out there and stay safe. We'll see you next time on Knights of Last Call.
I need you more.